Harper Audio presents Flamecaster by Cinda Chima. Read by Chima Guest. One. Healer. Compared to the freezing weather outside, the stable was warm and steamy, and alive with the sleepy murmurings of horses. Adrian sul'Harlan pulled off his fleece-lined gloves and stuffed them into his pockets. He went first to see if his father's pony, the latest in a long line of raggers, was still in his stall. He was, poking his head over the stall door, looking for a handout as usual. So his father hadn't left the city. Not yet, anyway. Adrian needed to talk to him before he did. He walked on down the line of stalls to look in on the piebald mare. She came forward to meet him, lipping hopefully at his hand. Adrian studied her critically. Her eyes were bright, ears pricked forward, and when he ran his hand over her shoulder, he could tell that the muscles of her withers were filling in. Sliding his free hand under his coat, he gripped his amulet and sent a tendril of power into the mare, looking for trouble. To his relief, the white-hot focus of infection was nearly gone. "You'll be all right," he murmured, stroking her head, proud that it was true. He heard Mancy's step and drag footsteps behind him. "I thought that was you, boy," she said, coming up next to him. "Here to see my Priscilla. It's amazing what you've done. I thought I had lost her, and now she's like a brand new horse. Actually, I'm looking for my da, and I thought I'd look in on Priscilla while I'm here," Adrian said. "Have you seen him?" She shook her head. "Not today, no." Worry flickered across her face. "You don't think the High Wizard will come here, do you? See, I'm moving slow this morning, and I only just got the front stalls mucked out. I need to—" "Don't worry," Adrian said, raising both hands. "I just thought he might have stopped by." Mancy was a soldier who'd been assigned to the stables while she recovered from a nasty leg wound, courtesy of one of the Kingdom of Arden's collared mages. Now her wound drew Adrian's attention like a poke in the eye. It wasn't healing properly, he could tell, and he wanted to know why. In fact, Mancy had the smell of death on her. "Hey, did you hear me?" That was when Adrian realized that Mancy had asked a question. "I'm sorry," he said, wrenching his attention back to the conversation. "What was that?" "I said, is it all right if I put her back on her regular feed?" Mancy said, a little huffily. "Oh, 2 more days of the mash, and then she can go back," he said. Grain was hard to find after a quarter-century of war. Nobody was getting fat in Fellsmarch these days. "I was telling Hughes at Westgate about you," Mancy said. "I told him you was just a littling, but you can work miracles with horses." I'm not a littling, Adrian thought. Maybe I don't have my growth, but I'm already 13. "He's got a moon-blind horse that aren't getting any better, and he asked me to ask you if you might come by and take a look." The Westgate was 2 days' ride away, and Adrian was hoping to leave town in a week. "I can't go out there right now, but I'll send over an ointment that might help," he said. He paused, clearing his throat. A littling healer might be good enough for horses, but... "How's the leg?" Mancy grimaced. "It's all right, I guess. It's closed over, but it's still giving me a lot of pain. Plus, I can't seem to get my strength back. I've been back to the healing halls 3 different times, but they don't want to see me." Mancy's collarbones stuck out more than before, and Adrian noticed that she leaned on the stall door for support. "Mind if I take a look?" Mancy blinked at him. At me. You do people, too. Adrian bit back the first response that came to mind. Sometimes. All right, then. Be my guest. Nancy sat down on an overturned bucket and rolled back her uniform breeches. When he went to touch her leg, though, she flinched back. You aren't going to do anything, are you? Like hex it or something? Vale folk were wary of wizards, for good reason. I'm just going to take a look, all right? The wound was closed, the skin tight and hot, the leg puffy all the way into the ankle. Adrian brushed his fingers over it, murmuring a charm, and saw that the infection had gone into the bone. He'd seen it before in horses, and they always had to be put down. Adrian looked up at Nancy, chewing his lower lip. The leg would have to come off, but he knew she wouldn't take that verdict from a 13-year-old untrained wizard. Nancy, he said, your leg needs to be seen right away. Go back to the healing halls and ask for Titus Griffin. Don't get shuffled off to anyone else, and don't take no for an answer. Tell him I sent you, that he needs to look at your leg. Do it now. Nancy blinked at him, her brow furrowed. Now? But right now I need to mark out that can keep, Adrian said. If you want, I'll put in a word with Jarrett. The stable-master owed him a favor. You don't need to do that, Nancy said. She swallowed hard. I'll just let him know where I am, if you really think I need to go now. You do. Adrian put a hand on her shoulder, soothing her. You'll be all right. With Nancy on her way to Griffin, Adrian continued his search for his father. Outside again, it seemed even colder than before. The wind howled down from the spirits, sending bits of greenery from the recent solstice celebration spinning down the street. He really, really needed to get a yes from his father before his mother, the queen, found out what he was up to. His father, the high wizard, was a little more flexible when it came to rules, like the one that said that wizards weren't supposed to receive their amulets until they turned 16. Adrian reached for his amulet now, as he did a dozen times a day, feeling the usual flow of energy from wizard to amulet. Wizards continually produced flash, a magical energy. Amulets stored flash until enough accumulated to do something worthwhile. Without an amulet, flash leaked away and was of no use to anyone. His father had given him this hand-me-down amulet 2 years ago, on his 11th name day, along with a lecture on all the bad things that would happen if he abused or misused it. Adrian had worn the amulet, carved in the shape of a hunter, on a chain around his neck ever since. He'd trained hard in the use of magic, most often with his father when he was home, elsewise with some of his father's hand-picked friends. Yet it had made no difference. His older sister, Hannah, was dead, and his little sister Liz was heartbroken, and Adrian needed to get out of town. If his da wasn't in the castle close, and if he hadn't ridden out, he'd be somewhere in the city, likely Rag Market or Southbridge. Adrian headed for the markets. To call them markets these days was being generous. With solstice just over, the shelves had been cleared of what little food there was. There was nothing on offer but some tired-looking root vegetables that had been held back till now so as to fetch the best prices. His father said it reminded him of the hard times during the reign of Queen Mariana, when there was never enough to eat, or during Arden's siege of Fellsmarch Castle, when they had contests to come up with new recipes for barley. Hard times are back, Adrian thought, if they ever left. For solstice, the royal family had dined on venison, courtesy of their upland clan relations. Otherwise it would have been ham and barley pies, light on ham, heavy on barley. Not that it mattered. None of them had much of an appetite. It was the first midwinter since Hannah died. Around him the market was waking up. First the bakers, produce sellers, and fishmongers, Then the second-hand shops selling hard-worn, picked-over goods, all claimed to be clan-made. This was his father's home ground. He'd once ruled this neighborhood as the notorious street lord of the Ragger gang. Adrian always drew attention, too, when he walked the markets. He was too easy to pick out as Han Alistair's son, with his red hair and wizard's glow. Today it seemed worse than usual. He felt the pressure of eyes upon him wherever he went, the prickle on the back of his neck that meant he was being watched. He guessed it was because he'd been in the camps in the mountains when Hannah died, and he hadn't been down to the markets since. He asked after his da in several of the market stalls. Nobody had seen him, but they all sent their good wishes for a brighter new year. Adrian had nearly given up when he walked into the flower market, where the merchants were just unpacking their wares. There was his father, his back to Adrian, bargaining with one of the vendors, a young girl in beaded demon-eye garb. His da was dressed in the nondescript clothing he wore when he walked the city streets, but there was no mistaking the broad shoulders and deceptively slouchy stance. His sword slanted across his back, which was nothing unusual in a city filled with soldiers. His hair glinted in the frail winter light, more silver than gold these days. His amulet was hidden, but he wore the aura that other wizards recognized. He was known, especially here on his home ground, as Han Cuffs Alistair, the low-born hero who'd become High Wizard, the strategist who continually outfoxed the Ardnine king. He was a former street thief, their former street thief, who'd married a queen. The flower vendor was flushed and fluttering at having such royalty in her shop, bringing blossoms forward and arranging them in a copper bucket to show them off. Adrian edged closer, listening as his father bantered with the vendor. In the end, he chose red foxflowers, white lilies, and blue trueheart, along with a few stems of bog marigold and maiden's kiss. The girl wrapped them in paper and handed them over. When he tipped a handful of coins into her palm, she tried to give it back. "Oh, no, my lord, I couldn't. I'm so very sorry for your loss. I used to see the princess in the mountain camp sometimes. Running Wolf was always kind to me." Running Wolf was Hannah's clan name. His father closed her fingers over the money, looking her straight in the eyes. "Thank you," he said. "We all miss her, but you still need to make a living." He bowed and turned away, cloak kiting behind him. The girl looked after him, blinking back tears, clutching her hair in her fist to keep it from flying in the bone-chilling wind. That was when his father spotted Adrian lurking nearby. "Ash, this is a surprise," he said, using the nickname he favored, ASH, for Adrian sul'Harlan. Striding toward him, he extended the flowers. "What do you think?" he said, almost shyly. "Will your mother like them?" "That depends on how much trouble you're in," Adrian said, extracting a faint smile from his father. They both understood what the flowers were for, and why his father was in the market on this particular day. Adrian's older sister, Hanalea Anaresa, the princess heir, had died 6 months ago, at the summer solstice, in a skirmish along the border with Tamron. From the look of things, she'd been the last one standing, taking down 6 Ardnine mudbacks before she went down herself. Her bound captain, Simon Byrne, had died at her side. The Ardnine general, Marin Karn, had severed her head and carried it back to his king. King Gerard had ordered it paraded through the captive realms, then sent it back to her mother, the queen, in an ornate casket. Hannah was only 20 years old. She'd been the golden child who combined her father's good looks and street-savvy charm and her mother's ability to bring people together and lead. She was one who could walk into a room and command it within minutes. She'd been a symbol of hope, the promise that the Grey Wolf line would survive. If the Maker is good and all-powerful, Adrian thought, Then why would this be allowed to happen? What cruel twist of fate sent a large Ardenine company into the borderlands in an area that hadn't seen fighting for nearly a year? Most importantly, why Hannah? Why not Adrian? She was the heir. He was in every way the spare. "What brings you to the markets?" his father said, draping an arm around Adrian's shoulders. He was never afraid to show affection in public. "Are you buying or selling?" "I wanted to talk to you, privately." His father eyed him keenly. "You're selling, then, I believe," he said. "I have some time right now. Come to breakfast, and we'll talk." 2. A Cruel Frost. They chose a place called the Drover's Inn, a hostelry on Market Square that Adrian had never been to. Everyone knew his father, of course. The server led them to the very best table near the hearth and clunked steaming mugs of cider down in front of them. "I'm so sorry, Lord Alistair," she said, her cheeks pink with embarrassment. "All we got is porridge and a wee bit of ham, but the bread is fresh this morning." "I was hoping for porridge," his father said, signaling for her to bring 2 bowls. Setting the bouquet carefully aside, he leaned his sword against the wall and slung his cloak over the back of a chair and sat. He always sat facing the door, a throwback to his street lord days. He looked tired, the dark circles under his eyes still visible against his sun-kissed skin. He'd lost weight, too, during the long marching season. Adrian resisted the temptation to reach out and grip his father's hand so he could look for damage. "Da," he said. "Are you—" "I'm all right," his father said, taking a deep swallow of cider. "It's been a hard season for all of us. But now you're leaving again." Adrian had promised himself that he wouldn't sulk like a child, but he came close. At that, his father hunched his shoulders and darted a guilty look his way. "Your mother's seen wolves every day for the last week. Something bad is about to happen, and I need to figure out what it is and how to prevent it." Visions of gray wolves appeared to descendants of the gray wolf line of queens in times of trouble and change. They were actually the dead queens, ancestors of the living queens of the fells, come back as a warning. "How can you figure out how to prevent something when you don't know what it is?" Wolves had appeared in the days before Hannah died, but it had happened anyway. To Adrian, a vague warning was worse than none at all. The porridge arrived, steaming, with the promised bits of ham arranged on top for show. When the server left again, his father said, "I think that the attack on Hannah's triple was more than very bad luck. I think she was the target." "How would they know it was her?" Adrian asked. "How would they know where she was?" His father leaned across the table. "I think someone told them. I think Arden has a spy on the inside." "No," Adrian said with conviction. "Who would do that? Everyone loved her. And why would Arden target Hannah in particular? She's the heir, I know that, but wouldn't it have made more sense to go after General Dunedain?" "Not if the goal is to break your mother's heart," his father said. "Captain Byrne and Shiloh Trailblazer have been over the killing field dozens of times. From the looks of things, it wasn't just a platoon. It was an entire company. Hannah was smart and a strong fighter, but it's unlikely she would take down a half-dozen Ardenines before they killed her, unless they were holding back, trying to take her alive." He paused, glancing around for eavesdroppers. "There's more," he said. "It appears that her death wound was self-inflicted. We believe that when she realized that she was about to be captured, she shoved her own dagger through her heart." Adrian felt like he'd been daggered himself. "She killed herself?" "What would you have done in her place?" his father asked. Adrian shuddered. On this one point they all agreed. It had been a blessing that Hannah hadn't been taken alive to Arden's court, to the dungeons of the monstrous king of Arden, Gerard Montaigne. It was one thing to break their hearts. It would have been worse if he'd held their hearts in his hands. His father pushed bits of ham around his bowl with his spoon. "Montaigne is under considerable pressure from his thanes to finish this thing. They've been spending men and treasure for a quarter-century with little to no results. Perhaps the King of Arden has hit on a new tactic, targeting the royal line, the Queen's family. This is a grudge match, remember. Your mother rejected him in a very public way." Adrian knew that story. The Queen had refused to sign over her queendom in exchange for the King of Arden's hand in marriage. "But that was 25 years ago," he protested, not wanting it to be true. "He got married eventually, didn't he, to somebody else?" "Don't expect it to make sense, Ash. Montaigne is a proud, nasty brute who's used to getting his own way. My biggest regret is that I didn't shiv the bastard when I had the chance." Looking into his father's face, Adrian saw a rare glimpse of the ruthless street lord he'd once been, until his father ran a hand over his face, as if to wipe that person away. Adrian's skin prickled. It was like he felt the hand of the Maker touch the delicate thread that connected life and death. "So what can we do?" "If we can identify who betrayed Hannah, that would be a start," his father said. "One of our eyes and ears has an informant who claims to know something. I'm supposed to meet with them in Southbridge in a little while." The temple church in the market sounded the quarter hour, reminding them both that time was passing. "Now," his father said, placing his hands flat on the table, "what was it you wanted to talk to me about?" Adrian took a gulp of cider for courage. "You know, I've been working as a healer with the clans the past 2 summers, and I've been helping with the Highlander cavalry string when I can." "So I've heard. If Willow had her way, she'd like you to apprentice with her year-round. She's not as young as she used to be, and there's never enough healers available during the marching season. General Dunedain wouldn't hold still for it, though. She'd like to put you in charge of the military stables full-time. Everywhere I go, all I hear about is how you can work magic with horses. It's too bad there's only one of you." Right, Adrian thought. It's too bad. So he hurried on. "I've also spent time in the healing halls in the city." "Ah," his father said, his face hardening. "Lord Vega's domain. I keep hoping he'll retire." Harryman Vega was the wizard who oversaw the healing halls in the capital, the ones wizards and most Valefolk patronized. "That's the problem," Adrian said. "Willow can't help me with high magic, and Lord Vega has no interest in clan treatments and green magic. He still thinks it's witchery for the gullible masses. And until I graduate from mistwork, he won't let me do more than make beds and do the washing up." Mistwork was the school for wizards at Odin's Ford. "And you can't go to Mistwork until after your 16th name day." "Right." Adrian took a deep breath and plunged on. "I can't get into Mistwork at 13, but Spiritus accepts novices at 11, just like Wean House." "Spiritus?" "That's the Healer's Academy at Odin's Ford. You wouldn't remember it. It's just 3 years old. They're combining green magic, music and art therapies, clan remedies, and eventually wizardry." "Eventually?" His father raised an eyebrow. "That's the goal. But from what I hear, the deans at Mistwork haven't been eager to join in so far." His father snorted. "Why am I not surprised?" "My thought was I could go to Spiritus now, then move over to Mistwork when I'm eligible.
That way I won't waste time watching people die who might have lived if I only had the skills. Despite his best efforts, his voice shook. That's the thing about guilt, his father said. It always seems like there's enough to go around. The only ones who don't take a share are the ones who are actually guilty. He paused. Lines of pain etched deeply into his face. I lost my mother and sister when I wasn't much older than you. I did my best, but my best wasn't good enough. He ran his fingers over his serpent amulet. I never angled to be High Wizard. All I've ever wanted is to protect the people I care about. And now I've lost Hannah, too. It's not your fault what happened to Hannah, Adrian said. It was odd to be in the position of consoling his father. Hannah was a good fighter, and Mama is too, and Liz... I guess Liz will be when she gets older. His younger sister, Alyssa, was only 11. It's not your fault either, his father said, reaching across the table and gripping Adrian's hand. We don't protect them because they're weak. We protect them because they are strong, and strong people make enemies. We just need to do our best, whatever it takes, to protect your mother and sister, the Grey Wolf line, and pray that it's enough. My best can be better, Adrian said, looking his father in the eyes. His father got the point. He tilted his head. How do you know they would take you on that Spiritus? The Dean of Spiritus is a voyageur healer named Taliesin Bogard. The voyageurs were a nomadic tribe of sheep-herders from the Heartfang Mountains who traveled the flatlands in colorful caravans. Flatlanders claimed they were witches, like that was a bad thing. Taliesin spent some time at Marisa Pines while I was there, and we got along. I've been in touch with her, and she's hot to make this happen. I would be the first wizard to attend. They're hoping that if the deans at Mistworks see what's possible, then maybe they'll come around. His father laughed. You're too much like your mother, always 2 steps ahead of me. After a beat, he went on. Speaking of the Queen, what does she say? Adrian cleared his throat. I haven't talked to her about it. Ah, his father said, rubbing his chin. Trying to slide in the back gate, are you? You know she won't be eager to let you out of her sight after what happened to Hannah. I was hoping you might help me persuade her. His father fiddled with the flowers, knocking a few petals loose. As you know, she's not happy with me right now. I might not be your best advocate. Maybe if we waited a bit. Talison's here now. She came to visit family for solstice. If I can get permission, I can go back with her. So you are in a hurry for an answer. His father looked down at his hands and picked at a scab on his knuckles. It sounds like a sensible plan, he said finally. A good use of your talents, and close to your heart. I think you should go. I'll do whatever I can to make it happen. See if you can arrange time with your mother tonight, and I'll be there, ready to deploy my meager weapons in your defense. Thank you, Adrian said simply. He knew his Da would understand. He somehow always did. The bells bonged out the hour. I'd better go, his father said. It's already 10, and I don't want to be late. I'll see you tonight. He swept his cloak around his shoulders, strapped on his baldric, and slid his sword into place. Every eye in the room followed him as he went out the door. Adrian gazed after him, his gut in turmoil. His father's theory about Hannah had unsettled him. What if it were true? He'd thought of her death as tragic bad luck, a matter of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, part of the senseless carnage of the war. But now, there was something he was missing, some pattern that he wasn't seeing.
Hannah had died at midsummer, an event the wolves foretold. Now it was midwinter, and the wolves were back, and his father was heading to a meeting with an unknown informant. His father's words came back to him. Perhaps the King of Arden had hit on a new tactic. No. Oh, no. Da! Lurching to his feet, Adrian careened out the door of the tavern. Breathlessly, he scanned the market square, but he didn't see his father. Which street would he take to Southbridge? Since he was late, he'd probably take the most direct path, down the way of the Queens to the river. Fighting through the market day crowds, Adrian turned onto the way and ran, dodging carriages and families out for a stroll. The cobbled pavement was perilous and layered with snow and ice. It was like one of those dreams, when you try to run and your feet seem to be glued to the ground. Several times he nearly fell, and once he was nearly run down by a teamster who swore at him as he streaked past. Now he was almost to the river, and he still didn't see his father. If he'd turned off into one of the side streets or alleys, Adrian would never find him in time. When Adrian finally spotted him, far ahead, he was nearly to the bridge, the bouquet of flowers still in his hand. Adrian put on speed, already working on what he would say. "I know you're street savvy and all, but I think you're walking into a trap." He was so focused on his father that he scarcely resisted when somebody grabbed him from behind and clapped a hand over his mouth. His attacker pulled a hood over his head and began dragging him backward. Adrian could feel magic buzzing into him, no doubt an immobilization charm. But Adrian was wearing a clan talisman alongside his amulet, a pendant that absorbed attack magic. He pretended to go limp, and when his captor adjusted his grip, Adrian came up off the balls of his feet, hearing a crunch and a screech of pain as his head smashed into cartilage. When the grip on him loosened, Adrian twisted free and tried to dodge into the alley, but plowed straight into someone who held him tightly against his body, so Adrian couldn't reach his amulet or yank away the hood. "Learn to use all your senses," his father always said. "That way, if you're blind, you can use your ears and your nose and your hands instead." From the feel of the man's body and the angle at which he held him, Adrian could tell he was tall, spare, and gifted. He could also feel something metallic and jingling that hung at his waist under his robes. Not an amulet, but what? "Don't let him touch the jinx piece," one of them growled. "I'm not an idiot," Alleyman snarled. "Take the boy. Our agreement was that I wouldn't be personally involved in this." The voice seemed familiar, and there was a scent about him, a familiar scent that Adrian couldn't place. As they made the handoff, Adrian managed to strip back the hood. He was surrounded by cloaked and hooded men. He saw his father in the distance, already midway across the bridge. "Da! Help!" His father heard and turned. The flowers fell to the bridge deck like jewels scattered on the pavement as he drew his sword in one fluid movement and charged at them. All around Adrian, swords hissed free. While his captor was distracted, Adrian brought both feet down on his instep. The wizard howled. Something smashed down on Adrian's head, and he landed flat on his face on the icy cobblestones, twisting his ankle. "Careful," somebody growled. "Don't hit the mageling too hard. We want him alive." Mage. That was what they called wizards in Arden. Close by, Adrian heard the clatter and clash of swordplay, smelled the acrid scent of wizard flame, heard somebody scream as a blade hit home. Black spots swarmed in Adrian's vision as he tried and failed to prop himself up. Tried not to spew onto the stones. Finally, he rolled onto his back. His vision cleared enough that he saw his father, surrounded by 6 or 8 swordsmen, fighting like a fury in the stories with flame and sword. He was backing toward him, trying to get close to Adrian, but he hadn't escaped the bite of the blades. His cloak was already sliced through in several places and spotted with blood. It took everything Adrian had to sit up, then straighten to a standing position. He swayed, then shouted, "Leave him alone!" Gripping his amulet, he stood up next to his father and launched a flaming volley of his own, putting all of his frustration and fury into it, driving the assassins back. "No, Ash! Run! Get to the river if you can!" his father shouted, pivoting and cutting down another swordsman. "Get into the river and dive!"
I'm not leaving you. We can win this. That was when his father staggered, the tip of his sword drooping a little. He looked at the assassins, tried to lift his sword again, but it was as if it was too heavy. Da, what's wrong? Adrian stepped in closer, but his father shook his head, reached for his amulet, then dropped his hand away, swearing softly. His body shuddered, and despite the cold, a sheen of sweat gilded his face. That's when Adrian knew. It was poison. His father was poisoned. He followed his father's gaze and saw that the assassin's blades were stained blue-gray with it. His father stumbled to his knees, his sword clattering free on the stones. His face was pale, as if the blood were called to other places. "That one's done," the leader said. He pointed at Adrian with his poison-daubed blade. "Bring the mageling and let's go." Howling with rage, Adrian turned and charged toward the assassins, sending a deluge of flame out ahead. But somehow his father tripped him, and he went down hard on his face in the snow. His father crawled forward and covered his body with his own. He felt warm breath in his ear. "Lay still," he said. "Play dead. Buy some time. The blue jackets will come. These ones will run. They don't want to be caught and questioned." Adrian struggled to get up, but his father had him pinned. He heard what sounded like an army of running feet and somebody shouting, "The High Wizard! The bastards have killed the High Wizard!" A mob of people hurtled past. Adrian heard screams and blows landing, shouts of rage and despair. Finally wriggling free, he gripped his amulet with one hand, pressing the other hand into his father's chest. He sent power in, seeking to isolate the poison. But it was everywhere, and already the spark of life was all but extinguished. He ripped his father's cloak and shirt away, exposing wounds that should have been minor. He sent Flash in directly, desperately trying to draw the poison out. It hit him like a runaway cart, and he reeled back. "Don't," his father whispered, twisting away from Adrian's hand. "You don't want to risk it. You're not strong enough on your own. Wait for help." Adrian understood. Wizard healers took on the ailments of their patients, and so healing a gravely sick patient was always risky, even more so for someone who didn't know what he was doing. But there would be no waiting, because waiting meant that his father would die. "I'm going to save you," Adrian growled. "I don't care what it costs. You're important. You need to live." "Ash, please listen. I have been saved so many times," his father said. "First your mother saved me, and then you and your sisters. I'm not the one who needs saving now." His body shuddered again. "Save yourself and the line. Your mother will take this hard, and she's had enough grief in her life already. Tell her that having her, that being with her, that loving her, it was worth it. It was worth it. Will you tell her that?" "No!" Adrian cried. "You can tell her yourself. I'm not letting you go." "Sometimes you have to let go." His father took both his hands and closed them over the serpent amulet. "This is yours. I want you to go to Odin's Ford and learn how to use it." And then he was gone, the spiritist departing like a whisper on the wind, or a gray wolf on the snow. And with it, Adrian's childhood. A fierce anger ignited inside him, mingled with guilt and pain. His father had survived a lifetime of fighting, until Adrian lured him into a fight he couldn't win. He'd failed him in every way possible. He bowed his head over their joined hands and prayed to whatever god was listening. Take me instead. Spare him, please." The gods, it seemed, were occupied elsewhere. Adrian was no use in a fight. and he was no use as a healer. He was no use to anyone. He couldn't bear the thought of facing his mother and sister and telling them what had happened. How could he live in a world that claimed the good and left the bad alone? He lifted the serpent amulet from around his father's neck and hung it around his own. He didn't much care where he went, as long as it was away from there. So he ran, limping badly, until he lost himself in the tangle of streets.
3. Riley. The day Jenna's friend Riley died began as they all did, at 3 a.m, with the long, bone-jarring ride up the mountain to the mine. It was sleeting when Jenna trudged up the hill to the pickup place, so she was shivering and soaked through by the time she got there. The wagon was waiting, the horses steaming and stomping in the cold, the driver yelling at her to hurry up. He didn't want to get fined for being late. Jenna shook off the ice as best she could and climbed in, squeezing in next to Riley as the wagon lurched into motion. She always sat next to Riley if there was room, with little Maggie on her other side. He'd put his arm around their shoulders, their bodies pressed tight together. That way, they'd all three stay warm, and she could sleep, which made the workday seem shorter. On the way home, if they could stay awake, she and Riley would talk about what they wanted to be when they grew up, even though Riley was 15 and already grown, and Jenna 12 and nearly grown. They'd made a pact that they would get out of the mines one day. Today, Riley had this smug look on his face, like he was hiding a great big secret. As soon as Jenna got settled, he draped a bright red cloak over the two of them, pulling it up over their heads to keep off the sleet. The cloak smelled of wet sheep, and it was scratchy, but it was big enough to cover them both, even leaving a corner for Maggie, and it was rum warm. Jenna fingered the wool, snuggling down inside it. "Riley, where'd you get such a fine cloak?" "There was an explosion at the ironworks 2 days ago, and 3 of the colliers was killed, so the foreman, he gave me one of their cloaks." "You got a cloak off a dead man?" Jenna stared at him, horrified. Riley shrugged. "He won't be needing it." But that's bad luck," Jenna said. "Everybody knows that." "Me, I think it's good luck, 'cause we're warmer for it. Also 'cause it's like a cave to hide in." He leaned close, his lashy brown eyes meeting hers. She knew he wanted to kiss her. He'd done it before, but was a little shy with Maggie there. Jenna pulled his head down toward hers, and he kissed her on the lips. Her cheeks burned, but she felt a pleasant tingle deep in her belly. She didn't know what to say, so she changed the subject. "I have a surprise for you, too." She patted her lunch bucket. "In here." He eyed the bucket. "If I guess, will you tell me?" "Maybe." "It's a meat pie, isn't it?" Riley was big and strong, and he always seemed to be hungry. Jenna ate better than most because her father owned a tavern. She'd brought Riley a meat pie once before. Maggie overheard. "A meat pie? Can I have a bite?" Maggie was probably 7 years old, scrawny as a baby bird. She was an orphan, so she was always hungry too. There were lots of hungry orphans in town, though lots had died. If Jenna had a sister, she would want her to be just like Maggie, except better fed and living somewhere other than Delphi. Jenna shook her head. "Sorry, Maggie, it's not a meat pie. It's a book." "A book?" Riley looked away and cleared his throat. "But you know I can't read. I'm fixin' to learn, but—" "I'll teach you," Jenna said. "I'll read it to you on the way home." "You will?" Riley's eyes widened. "Can I listen too?" Maggie said. "You tell the best stories." Jenna nodded. "You can listen, and here." Digging in her pocket, she pulled out a small, wrinkled apple and handed it to Maggie.
I found this on my way up to the ride. You can eat it now or save it for the midday."
Maggie had already bitten into it. She knew better than to save things for later. The juice ran down her chin, making trails in the dirt on her face. Once she'd finished the apple, she tossed the core and snuggled down to sleep, her head in Jenna's lap. Jenna stroked her hair, working out some of the tangles.
"Most of my stories come from books," Jenna said to Riley. "I used to read all the time before I went into the mines. My dad taught me how. I liked to pretend I was one of the characters."
Riley wrapped their cloak tighter to keep out the wet and looked over the packed-in bodies around them. He blotted rain from the end of his nose with his sleeve. Riley was usually a cheerful sort, but on this morning he seemed a little downcast. Maybe because the bosses were working him harder than anybody else.
"If I was a character in a book, I'd want to be in a different story." "You will be," Jenna said, leaning closer so she could speak into his ear. "You can be in my story."
And then, for reasons she couldn't explain, she leaned toward him and shared the secret she'd kept forever.
"See, I'm mage-marked."
"Mage-marked?" His eyebrows came together. "What's that?"
"Shh," she said, clapping her hand over his mouth and glaring around the packed wagon.
From what she could tell, everyone else was asleep. It was amazing how alone you could be in the middle of a crowd.
"Nobody can know."
She took his hand and placed it over the raised emblem on the back of her neck, the spider web of metal, the smooth stone at the center. His eyes widened as he brushed his fingers over the surface.
"What's it mean?" he whispered. "It means I'm powerful."
"Well," Riley said, swallowing hard, "maybe you are, but I don't have a mark." Jenna was instantly sorry she'd brought the whole thing up. She'd kept it to herself for this long. Why had she chosen to blurt it out now?
"That doesn't matter," she said. "We are chosen, you and I. We'll write our own story, you'll see."
Putting her hands on Riley's shoulders, she looked into his eyes.
"When I look at a person, I can see who they really are."
"You can't," Riley said.
"I can."
That was a stretcher. She'd see pictures or hear fragments was all, but it wasn't easy figuring out what they meant. Sometimes it was the person as they were, only clearer, truer, like when somebody lets their guard down. And sometimes it was the person they were going to be. Other people she knew by their scent. For instance, Riley smelled of sweat and hard work and kindness and honesty.
"Who am I?"
Riley asked, lifting his chin and striking a pose. Jenna stared at him. She saw him just as he was. Beyond that, nothing at all.
What is it?"
Riley swiped at his face like he was afraid it was dirty.
"Why, Riley, I think you're going to be a king,"
Jenna said finally.
"A king? What do you mean?" "I keep seeing you, and a crown, and a sword. That must mean you're meant for great things, right?"
She leaned in close and whispered,
"In our story, the king of Arden gets eaten by wolves in chapter 1.
Riley laughed softly, but he still looked around to make sure nobody could overhear.
"For now, I'd be glad to hear the story you brought. It'll give me something to look forward to while we're down in the mine."
He sighed.
"I wish it was the end of the day right now."
But it wasn't the end of the day. They were just pulling up in front of the No. 2 mine, which meant that the end of the day was 12 hours away. They called it the No. 2 because a year ago there'd been an explosion at the No. 1 mine that buried the entrance under tons of rubble, shutting it down. The colliers said it was fire damp, the explosive gas that built up in the mine. The Ardenine bosses claimed it was sabotage because it happened at change of shift, when there were few miners underground. The king of Arden was furious when he heard, because he needed coal and steel to put weapons into the hands of his army. So they cut a new shaft into the mountain. Most of the able-bodied men and women in Delphi had been forced into the mines already, so King Gerard issued orders to herd up every littling in Delphi and send them into the mines to make up for lost time. That was a year ago. The youngest litlings died the first month. They'd be carried from the mine at the end of each shift, piled in a wagon and driven back down to town so their parents could claim them. Jenna was just 11 when she went into the mine, but she was wiry and strong and healthier than most. Plus, she was too stubborn to die and leave her da all alone. "Keep your head down now," Jenna said when they parted at the crossroads at the bottom of the shaft.
"Keep your head down,"
Riley said back. It was a ritual with them, like a charm of protection before he trudged off toward the deepest part of the mine. More and more they'd put him on the coalface as a hewer, digging with a pick and shovel with the other men. By the end of the day, he was so tired that he slept all the way home. He'd been in the mines for 3 years. He'd started when he was a 12-year, being big even then. The more often he worked the coalface, the more he coughed. When Jenna first went into the mine, Riley was a hurrier. He wore a leather strap around his waist and pulled heavy carts of coal up the ramp to the cage. Jenna worked as a thruster, pushing the carts from behind, or sometimes as a trapper, opening trap doors so the carts could rattle through. You had to look sharp if you were a trapper. If a cart came up and you weren't ready, you'd get run over. Or you'd open up a trap, and the fire damp would roar out like a dragon and burn you right up. Jenna had a knack for knowing when fire damp was lurking behind the trap. It was like she could feel the seething heat of it, her heart beating with the pulse of the flame. Once she pulled Maggie off right as she was about to open the trap. One of the bosses swung his club at her for slowing down production. Then he opened the trap and was charred to a crisp. People liked to work with Riley because he was so strong that it made it easy on the thrusters, and he was always careful of the trappers, especially at the end of the shift when everyone was tired. Riley also had a way of getting between the bosses and the litlings when they were handing out beatings, and showing up when this particular wormy-lipped guard tried to drag a little girl into a side tunnel. He didn't say anything. He'd just be there until the guard let her go. The bosses didn't like Riley because of what he said and did, and because the other miners looked up to him, even though he was only 15. Jenna was sorry that Riley was in the mine. At the same time, having him there made her life bearable. When the end of the shift finally came, they rode up in the cage together, holding hands. They walked out into the twilight, blinking like cave creatures, joining a jostling crowd of miners just outside. The wagons were not lined up as usual, but had been pulled over to one side. A tented pavilion had been set up a short distance from the mine, and the red hawk of Arden flew from the tent poles. There were armed soldiers everywhere, surrounding the pavilion and keeping a close watch on the collected miners. The soldiers wore black coats marked with the red hawk, too. The usual name for them was blackbirds.
"What's going on?"
Riley asked Britt Fletcher, who always seemed to know.
"It seems we're about to hear some scummer from His Majesty, King Gerard."
Fletcher spat on the ground. "He's here?" Jenna shrank back a little. "What's he doing here?"
"It seems that he and the missus are promenading around the Empire, showing how they aren't scared of a few patriots."
"What do you mean?"
"Aren't you heard? There's been riots in Tamron's seat, and rebels took over the keep at Baston Bay a few months ago. Didn't hold it long, but still. Word is that some of the Thanes is getting restless, 'cause they're tired of war."
Fletcher smiled, like he approved.
"Shh," Riley said, glancing around. "Somebody might hear."
Fletcher made no secret that he hated the King of Arden. Some whispered that he was an actual patriot, one of those who fought back against the king and his Blackbird guards. His family had died when Arden took the city, so he didn't have a lot to lose. He was old, near to 40, some said, so he'd be dead before long anyway.
"That must be him," Jenna murmured, pointing.
A small group of people had emerged from the pavilion amid a crowd of soldiers. Jenna recognized Delphi's greasy mayor, Willett Peters, along with Ned Shively, the big boss at the mine. Swiving Shively, the miners called him. With them was a finely dressed pair. It was hard to get a good look from that distance.
"Let's move up closer,"
Jenna said, thinking it might be her one chance to see a king or a queen in person.
"I don't think that's a good idea,"
Riley began, but she was already sliding through the crowd to the front so she could get a better view. Still murmuring protests, Riley followed after her, pulling his new red cloak closer around himself. Now at the front, Jenna got a good look at the king. He was a narrow man of medium height, with nearly colorless blue eyes and a thin, cruel mouth. He wore a slate-gray velvet jacket with a fine blue cape over top, already spotted from the sleet. The wind that blew down out of the mountains ruffled his mouse-brown hair. The woman with him was taller than the king, but she hunched down a little, maybe so people wouldn't notice. She looked to be a foreigner, with her tawny skin and brown eyes, and a mouth as full as the king's was stingy. She wore a pale yellow dress with a white fur wrap, yellow silk slippers, and white gloves.
"Who's that lady?"
Maggie asked Fletcher, pointing. She'd wormed her way up front, too.
"That's Queen Marina, poor thing," Fletcher said. "She was a princess in Tamron, daughter of the king. Gerard murdered her whole family, took over the kingdom and married her."
"She's beautiful," Maggie whispered.
Fletcher snorted. "Did you ever see anything like it? Little fancy shoes and white gloves in Delphi? They won't be white for long."
The King of Arden moved to the front of the pavilion, his queen a foot behind him, and looked down at the collected miners.
"Miners of Delphi,"
he said in a carrying voice.
"Queen Marina and I have come north to thank you for your hard work this past year. I know it hasn't always been easy, but I'm pleased to announce that coal and steel production is at an all-time high."
Mayor Peters and Boss Shively clapped like mad, but the miners just stood in stony silence.
"Now is not the time to pull back, however," the king said. "Indeed, we must redouble our efforts to put weapons into the hands of our soldiers. I have advised Mayor Peters and Master Shively that production goals for next year will be increased by 10%.
This was met by a rumble of protest. The queen looked from the miners to the king, frowning and biting her lower lip, as if this was bad news to her, too. Then her face went back to blank.
"I know this is an ambitious goal, but with St. Malthus's help, we will defeat the Witch Queen in the north and bring peace and prosperity to the Empire."
Nobody in Delphi looked for much help from St. Malthus. Although Arden had sent Malthusian missionaries into Delphi, they hadn't made much headway in converting people to the state church.
"How about you send old St. Malthus down into the mine?"
somebody shouted.
"We could use the help."
The soldiers moved forward, scanning the crowd, trying to identify whoever had spoken up. Meanwhile, the queen knelt at the edge of the stage to speak to Maggie. Jenna was right there, so she heard everything that was said.
"I have a little girl at home,"
the queen said softly in common. "Only she's younger than you. Her name is Madeleine." Maggie looked up at her, her eyes a startling blue in her coal-smirched face. She reached out her hand as if to touch the queen's dress, then jerked it back as if realizing that her grubby hand wouldn't do the queen's dress any good. The queen didn't seem worried. "What's your name?" she said.
"Maggie."
"Do your mommy and daddy work in the mine?" she asked.
"No,
Maggie said, looking puzzled.
They're dead.
She jabbed a thumb into her chest. "I work in the mine since I was 6. The queen reared back as if she'd been slapped, her eyes widening with horror. "Oh, no," she whispered, shaking her head. "You must be mistaken." But the queen must have seen that Maggie was telling the truth, because she took a quick look over her shoulder to see where the king was. Jenna looked too, just in time to see an object fly through the air and splat at Gerard's feet, splattering his clothing all the way to his waist. Jenna knew right away what it was. Steaming dung, dropped by the horses that pulled the coal wagons. She had to pick her way around it on a daily basis.
"Scummer,"
Fletcher muttered.
"They'll be hell to pay now. If they was going to do anything, they should have gone ahead and shot 'em, and done us all some good."
Jenna took a step away from him. Fletcher was like a plague you might catch if you got too close. Things moved fast after that. Black-jacketed guards closed in around the king, leaving the queen on her own at the edge of the stage until 2 soldiers hustled her to safety. Other blackbirds formed a ring around the gathered miners, so none of them could slip away. Shively's club-wielding thugs swarmed to the front of the stage. Jenna shrank back, suddenly sorry she'd pushed to the front. Riley wrapped an arm around her, sheltering her.
"All right,"
Shively snarled, slapping his club against his other hand.
"Who did that?"
Nobody made eye contact. Nobody said anything. Nobody dared to move, afraid to call attention to themselves.
"I'm warning you. Give him up, or you'll be sorry."
Nothing. That's when the King of Arden broke free from his guards and strode to the edge of the stage.
"These people have no imagination, Shively,"
the king said, his voice like melted ice.
"You have to make the consequences very clear."
As he spoke the last word, he reached down, gripped Maggie by the arm, and hauled her up onto the stage. Wrapping one arm around her, he lifted her up high while she wriggled and whimpered in fear.
"Now, the guilty party had better step forward, or I'll kill the ratling."
Everyone stood and stared at the King of Arden and the struggling Maggie, frozen with shock. Jenna wanted to turn away, but she couldn't. It was like she was hypnotized, like the king had cast some kind of monstrous spell. "Your Majesty, please, have mercy. She's just a child." The queen lunged toward him, but the blackbirds grabbed her arms, holding her fast. Maybe the dung-thrower would have stepped forward, but the king didn't give him much of a chance. With a quick, vicious move, he snapped Maggie's neck. Tossing the small body aside, Gerard looked out across the crowd.
"Let's just keep doing this, shall we, until somebody confesses. Now then, who's next?"
4. Patriot. Jenna couldn't remember deciding to kill the King of Arden. It was like everybody else was frozen, even the blackbirds, and she was moving. Before she put 2 thoughts together, she had vaulted up and over the edge of the stage and smashed right into him, putting him flat on his back. Looking down into his startled eyes, she rammed her fist into his blue-blood nose, wishing it was a knife between the ribs instead. The king's royal nose spouted blood like a fountain. It smelled like anybody else's blood, and it wasn't really blue. Gerard was stronger than she expected, though, and flipped her over, pinning her with his knee in her chest. He wrapped his blood-slick hands around her neck and began to squeeze. The strength drained out of her arms and legs, and she knew she was dying.
"No!"
Somebody smashed into them, sending the King of Arden sprawling. Jenna sucked in air through her bruised throat. Hands grabbed hold of her, and she kicked and struggled. But it wasn't the blackbirds. It was the miners, dragging her off the stage and pushing her toward the rear of the crowd.
"Stay down,"
Britt Fletcher said into her ear. But Jenna didn't stay down, because she knew who had come to her rescue. She worked her way to a place where she could see the stage. The King of Arden was back on his feet, behind a wall of blackbirds, trying to plug his nose with a snowy handkerchief. Blackbirds stood all along the edge of the stage, their crossbows aimed into the crowd. Riley stood nearby, his arms pinioned, his face battered almost beyond recognition. The queen sat forgotten, cradling Maggie's body in her arms. When he'd got the bleeding stopped, King Gerard crossed the stage to where Riley stood.
"Who are you?" Gerard said. "Another hero?"
Riley shook his head.
"No, sir. It was me. I was the one that done it. I threw the scummer at you. I did it, and I'm sorry." "Did you, now?"
The king stood, hands on hips, gazing at Riley. "No!" Jenna tried to fight her way toward the front of the crowd, but Britt Fletcher held her fast. He was rum-strong for an old man.
"Look here," he growled. "Don't make that boy throw away his life for nothing. We both know he didn't do it, but he's a goner now anyway. Nobody jumps the king and lives to brag about it."
"No," Jenna whispered, tears rolling down her face. But she smelled the truth on Fletcher, so she no longer struggled to get away. The King of Arden scanned the crowd, searching the sea of faces. Jenna held very still. Finally, heaving a sigh, he turned back to Riley.
"I'm not sure I believe you, but you'll do, I suppose. Hold him."
He drew his sword, turned, and rammed it into Riley's stomach all the way to the hilt, then twisted it. Riley made a sound, a kind of grunt, his eyes going wide. The king yanked free his blade with a wet pop, then stuck it in again in a slightly different spot. Now blood bubbled from Riley's mouth. Somehow, miraculously, his eyes met Jenna's and held.
"Finish him, you murderous bastard,"
Fletcher muttered. But clearly the King of Arden meant to take his time. He pulled out his blade, chose another spot, and stabbed Riley again. By now, black spots were swimming in front of Jenna's eyes, but Riley's eyes were still locked with hers, and she refused to faint and leave him on his own. Just then, she heard a sound, a kind of thwack from above and behind her. Riley's body jerked, and suddenly a feathered shaft stuck out of his throat just below his chin. It was an arrow, and just like that, Riley was gone. After that, it was bedlam. The king and queen disappeared in a hurry, and Shively's thugs waded into the crowd, swinging their clubs. Jenna turned and tried to run, but something smashed into the back of her head, and she went down. When she awoke, she could hear people talking in low voices. It was dark, and it was cold, even though she was wrapped up in something that smelled like wet sheep. It was Riley's cloak. She rubbed the fabric against her cheek, sniffling, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Her head hurt like fury, but her heart hurt even more, being broken. She sat up, put her feet down. Loose rock shifted under her feet.
"You're awake,"
somebody said in a gruff voice.
"Good. I thought maybe you was out for keeps."
It was Britt Fletcher. He set an oil lamp on the floor next to the bench she was lying on and thrust a steaming mug at her. It was barley coffee laced with something that just about lifted her scalp right off her head. Jenna drank it all. Fletcher watched her, his eyebrows lifting higher and higher until she clunked the cup down.
"You're a tough scrapper, aren't you?"
He rubbed his chin.
"How old are you? 10?
12. She looked around, stone as far as she could see in the flickering light from the lamp. "Are we in the mine?"
"Sort of. We're in the old number 1. We've dug out some of the tunnels so's we can get in and out."
"Why?"
"Makes a good hiding place, don't it?"
"For who?" Fletcher snorted.
"You, for one."
"What day is it? What's happened?"
"It's the day after the king's visit. He's already hightailed it back to the city."
And how many are dead?"
"That's the thing. They can't afford to kill too many of us, 'cause they need us to work the mines. There's just 4 dead, counting Riley and little Maggie. 4 too many. 5 counting you."
"Me?"
Jenna's hand closed on a large rock. "What do you mean?" Fletcher snorted. He sure snorted a lot. "Don't look at me like that. I aren't going to hurt you. What I mean is, as far as anyone knows, you're dead. You was killed in the riot." "I'm dead?" She thought of her Da, with his care-lined face and haunted eyes. "But what about my Da?" "We got word to him that you're safe. So, you have a choice. Would you rather stay dead and leave town, or go back and take your chances?" He held up a hand. "Before you decide, you should know that the king aren't forgot about you. The Blackbirds is looking for you on the quiet, asking questions, trying to find out who you are. Nobody knows nothing, of course." Jenna's middle hardened like iron slag. "Delphi's my home. I'm not going to leave my Da behind." "Wouldn't he go with you, to save your life?" "He'd have to leave the inn behind," Jenna said. "He's not that easy to make a living these days. He's too old to start over. I don't want to ask him to do that." Fletcher sighed. "I figured you'd say that. What if you come back as somebody else, somebody brand new to town, with a different name?" Jenna thought about it. Could she really pull it off? She'd always liked pretending to be somebody else. "I knew it's a risk if you're found out," Fletcher said. "I just don't want that boy Riley to have died for nothing." Me neither, Jenna thought, her fingers finding the raised emblem on the back of her neck. It was all her fault. First, she'd drawn the attention of the breaker by laying claim to a power she didn't have, a destiny rooted in witchery and fairy tales. Then she'd jumped the king with no thought to what might happen to those around her. She wasn't a child. She couldn't afford to be a child anymore. This was real life, not a fairy story, and she wouldn't forget that again. She'd come back as someone whose feet were planted firmly on the ground. "All right, we'll try it," she said, blotting tears away with her forearm. "Could I ask you something?" "Ask away," Fletcher said. "I don't know that I'll have the answer." "Is it true, what they say, that you're one of those patriots?" "Why do you want to know?" "Because I want to join up," Jenna said. "I mean to make Arden pay for what they've done." By Arden, she really meant the king of Arden, but he was far away already, so she'd start close to home. Jenna thought he would say no, would tell her she was too young, that it was too dangerous. Instead, he gave her a long, studying look. "You know what happens if you get caught," he said. Jenna thought about Riley, about how he died, and tried to ignore the shiver of fear that went through her. "If not for you, I'd be dead already." "True enough," Fletcher said, rubbing his chin. "We'll see." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. "There's one thing I just don't get," Jenna said. "The bad times really started after the explosion last year. What makes the king think we blew up the mine on purpose?" "What makes you think that we didn't?" Britt Fletcher said. Their eyes met and held. "Good," Jenna said. "I'm going to help you burn Arden to the ground." 5. The Voyageur. Adrian lay on his belly on a rooftop in the city of Delphi, peering down at the shop below. A gnarled walking staff hung next to the door, the sign of the Voyageur. Over the doorframe, a wooden sign had weathered to a whisper. La Ancienne, the old one. Voyageur children with stick-straight black hair, flat noses, and thick embroidered sheep's wool coats herded goats around the yard. It was 2 weeks since his father had died, 10 days since he'd slipped across the border onto enemy ground. Since his stays at Marisa Pine's lodge in the high country, Adrian knew how to survive in the mountains and navigate off-trail.
The border was porous to a single rider in a white winter cloak, even a rider with a bad ankle, a stolen pony, and a broken heart. Riding into Delphi was like descending into a fuming, sulphurous hell, if hell happened to be bitterly cold. The air was thick enough to chew, but almost impossible to breathe. It stung Adrian's eyes and set him to coughing. Everything was covered with a layer of soot and coal dust, thick enough to kill what little color there was. The people were thin and haggard and hollow-eyed, so worn out and weary that they took little notice of a stable boy with mud-brown hair, the result of a night spent rubbing black walnut paste and strong tea into it. He'd come here hoping to intercept the healer Taliesin Bogard on her way to Odin's Ford. She told Adrian that she planned to visit relatives in Delphi who owned a shop that sold herbs and remedies. This was the only one in town, so it had to be the place. He'd been watching it for a week, and there'd been no sign of Taliesin so far. It was risky to stay here, but he had nowhere else to go. The ankle was worrisome, swollen twice its size, purple and green. Maybe he deserved whatever pain he was in, but he wouldn't seek healing from someone he didn't know. A wizard can't use his gift to heal himself, and incompetence would only make matters worse. So he kept it wrapped and hoped for the best. Despite the ankle, he'd found bed and board in a stable in exchange for mucking out stalls. It seemed that help was hard to come by in Delphi, since every able-bodied person had been sent into the mines. To call it board was being generous, even by Felsian standards. Neither he nor his pony was living high. The herb shop stood in a Delphian neighborhood so desperate that the toughest street lord from Rag Market would think twice before moving in. First off, there was nothing worthwhile to steal. He'd already seen a knife fight break out over a warm pair of gloves. Second, the King of Arden's blackbird guards were thick as crows on a carcass. Black was a good color choice for Delphi, a mountain town that resembled a Fellsmarch gone horribly wrong. Adrian shivered. The heat from his body had melted the snow underneath him, and now he was soaked to the skin. Since he'd come to Delphi, he'd developed a cough and a fever that wouldn't go away. It was either camp fever from the wells or winter fever from exposure. It would be another day wasted, but he needed to get off the roof and out of the cold. Hearing voices below, he slid forward again, far enough so he could see over the gutter tiles. A wagon had pulled up in front of the shop, and the children who had been playing in the street clustered around it, chattering excitedly. The wagon was painted in voyageur style, and the ponies were sturdy, shaggy, mountain-bred. Adrian's heart beat faster. He slid back, out of sight, as a clutch of mounted blackbirds appeared, shouting at the driver to move the wagon out of the way. The blackbirds seemed bent on emptying the streets, using clubs and short swords to encourage those who didn't move fast enough. The wagon lurched into motion, turning down the alleyway next to the shop so it could park behind.
"Getting your eyes full, boy?"
The voice came from behind and above him. Before he could turn to look, the speaker delivered a vicious kick to the ribs, connecting with a crackling sound. Adrian rolled and came up on his knees, gasping, groping for his amulet, until he remembered where he was and let his hand drop away. Not a good idea to draw attention to himself with magical displays in a place where they burned the gifted. The speaker was a blackbird, dressed head to toe in black, down to his shiny black boots. He was totally bald, with a slash of a mouth and officer's braid on his shoulders. He reached down, gripped Adrian by the front of his cloak, and dragged him to his feet. With his other hand he pawed him all over, looking for weapons, but thankfully missing the amulet. He found nothing else, because Adrian, of course, had nothing.
"What's your name?"
the blackbird demanded in common.
"Ash Hansen."
The name spilled out before Adrian could edit it.
"Ash Hansen, sir,"
the blackbird said.
"Waiting for someone?" "No, sir."
The blackbird shook him hard. Adrian's weight came down on his ankle, and he smothered a cry of pain that evolved into a fit of coughing.
"Don't lie to me,"
the blackbird said, pulling him in close, so close Adrian could have spat in his face.
I'm going to ask you one more time. What are you doing up here?
Adrian cleared his throat. His fingers twitched, eager to take hold of his magic.
It's just, the air's clear up here. I've got this awful cough, and lately it's all blood.
Adrian coughed into his sleeve, then extended it for the blackbird's inspection.
See?
The blackbird recoiled from the offer.
Keep your distance, you consumptive Delphian whelpling. If you lot didn't live like vermin, you wouldn't catch the fever. I want you down off this roof and away from here, now.
He roared, giving Adrian a push.
If I see you again, I won't be so gracious.
Yes, sir, Adrian said, backing away.
Thank you, sir.
Back on the ground, Adrian circled around in back of the voyageur shop. He needed to get out of sight, but he didn't want to leave and come back and find the wagon gone. The rear courtyard was deserted, the wagon's owner having gone inside. He boosted himself up and into the bed of the wagon. It was a typical vagabond wagon, with a pallet in the front corner and cooking pots hanging from hooks. It was lined floor to ceiling with bins and containers of goods. Adrian knew he was in the right place when he breathed in the familiar scents of ginger and sage and peppermint. It brought back memories of nights in the upland lodges, Willow and Taliesin telling stories, their faces bronzed by firelight and inscribed by time and wisdom. Bunches of herbs hung from the ceiling, black cohosh and blessed thistle and mistletoe. Jars and bottles were jammed into net bags on all sides. It was an apothecary on wheels. Many of the containers were marked, but he didn't know what the marks meant. He began opening bins and jars, sniffing the contents, kindling light on the tips of his fingers in order to see. Finally, he found it, in the back corner, hidden behind 2 rows of bins. As soon as he sniffed it, he recognized the potent odor of death. Geddon weed, insurance against an uncertain future. Emptying peppercorns out of a cloth bag, he scooped a few tablespoons of weed into it and slipped it into his breeches pocket. Adrian knew he should leave and find some less compromising place to wait and watch, but this bit of thievery had exhausted him. He was shaking with chills and knew that his fever was rising again. He scrounged around until he found a packet of willow bark and a tin cup. Scooping the cleanest snow he could find into the cup, he melted it with flash from his hands until the water was steaming. Dirty or not, it was likely to be safer than water from the wells. Back in the wagon, he steeped the willow bark into a murky tea and drank it down. Still shivering, he found the pile of blankets and crawled underneath, planning to rest a bit until the willow bark took hold. The next thing he knew, somebody was shaking him awake and thrusting a lantern in his face.
Come on now, you. Climb down out of there before you freeze to death. If you're looking for syrup of poppy, it's locked up.
She spoke in common, but Adrian recognized the voice.
Taliesin,
he said, blinking, shading his eyes against the light. He heard a quick intake of breath as the lantern slipped from her hand, then a clunk as it hit the bed of the wagon. Taliesin usually didn't startle easily, but now she stared at him like she'd seen a ghost.
Blood and demons, she whispered. Mageling?
It's me, Adrian said.
What are you doing here? She demanded. They said you were dead.
Not quite, he said.
Well, you will be, or worse, if the blackbirds find you here. I need to talk to you.
She reached out and gripped his chin, leaning in to take a good look, then pressed the back of her hand against his forehead. The witch had a way of pinning a person with her narrow black eyes. She could tell more with a look than Adrian could with an hour of hands-on.
How long have you been sick?
She asked.
I'm all right,
he mumbled, trying to pull free.
Wait here, she said. I'll be right back.
It took a while, but she returned with a heavy sheep's wool coat.
Put this on, she said. It's my nephew's, but I think it's about the right size.
Adrian was still shivering, so he pulled it on.
Now, come inside where it's warm, she said. Nobody will see you. I've cleared everyone out of the back.
Before he knew it, he was sitting in the back room of the shop, and Taliesin was sitting between him and the door, pouring hot water over crushed leaves in a kettle. She'd made up a makeshift bed on the floor by the hearth. While the leaves steeped, she shook some black, wrinkled beans from a cloth bag onto a stone and added some dried brown root and a pinch of yellow powder.
Tell me what happened.
What have you heard?
It doesn't matter what I've heard. I asked you to tell me what happened.
She set the stone in Adrian's lap and handed him a pestle.
Crush these fine as you can.
Adrian weighed the heavy pestle in his hand. He didn't know what to say.
I'm guessing you're here because you want my help, Taliesin said. If you want my help, you're going to have to talk to me.
Adrian sighed. Maybe once Taliesin knew what had happened, she'd give him what he wanted.
My father is dead, he said, smashing the pestle down. Crunch. So I've heard. The whole town was in mourning when I left. For both of you.
Her voice softened.
I'm sorry, Mageling. It's my fault he's dead. Crunch.
You killed your own father?
No. Then I suspected someone else's fault. But it was my fault he couldn't get away. I lured him into a trap.
Ah. Taliesin nodded, her beads clattering together.
So you were in on the conspiracy? No.
Adrian struggled to organize his feverish thoughts.
Some people grabbed me on the street. My father came to help me, and they killed him. Then I suspect someone else used you to lure him into a trap. It doesn't change the fact that if I hadn't been there, he'd still be alive. I was useless. Worse than useless.
Despite his best efforts, tears welled up in his eyes.
Crunch.
Taking the ground herbs from Adrian, Taliesin brushed them into a mug and added the steaming contents of the kettle. She held it out to him.
Careful, she said. It's hot.
He blew on the tea, and the aroma boiled up into his nose. Glaring at Taliesin, he banged the mug down on the hearth.
If you think you're going to drug me and ship me back home, you're wrong, he said.
Taliesin sighed.
You're going to want that for pain, because I'm going to need to work on your ankle.
Taliesin should be queen of something, Adrian thought, since she was so good at giving orders and having them obeyed. He picked up the mug and sipped at the tea. Taliesin unbuckled his boot and slid it off. His ankle had not improved. The healer rolled her eyes.
You've been walking around on a broken ankle? Did you forget everything I taught you? I should be dead by now, Adrian said. Then it wouldn't matter. It's just blood and bones.
With a quick, expert snap, Taliesin had realigned the bone. The pain nearly put Adrian through the roof.
You could have warned me,
he said.
You're the one that didn't want to drink the tea,
Taliesin said without sympathy. She began wrapping the ankle with long strips of cloth.
Why are you here? I want to come with you to Odin's Ford, Adrian said. You said you could get me into Spiritus. I'll study with you, then transfer to Mistwork when I'm old enough. I can get you into Spiritus, but right now you should go home to your mother. You can't let her go on thinking you're dead or kidnapped. She needs you right now. She doesn't need me. She doesn't need anyone. If not for her, my dad would still be alive.
Even as he said it, Adrian knew that it was wrong and unfair. But he was sick and tired, and in no mood to be reasonable.
Ah,
Taliesin said, sipping at her own tea.
Then she was in on the conspiracy. I suppose she didn't love him? Just stop it, Adrian shouted.
A young girl poked her head between the curtains, that divided the back of the shop from the front. Taliesin waved her off without taking her eyes off Adrian.
"That's not what I mean, and you bloody well know it," Adrian hissed. "Yes, she loved him. He's dead because he loved her back, and because he loved me, and he shouldn't have had to pay that price for love."
"Aye, there is something we agree on." Taliesin set her cup down. "He shouldn't have had to pay that price. Love is the root of so much suffering and misery, so much loss. It's the worst thing in the world to risk yourself by loving someone. At the same time, it's the best thing in the world, and worth the risk. I don't know your mother and sister, but I know you, and I'd wager that they want you back." That was as close to a compliment as he'd ever got from Taliesin.
"I have to go to Odin's Ford," Adrian said. The last thing my dad said to me. He gave me his amulet, and he said, 'I want you to go to Odin's Ford and learn how to use it.' There's no way my mother would let me go now, after what's happened. It was bad enough after Hannah."
"Tell the Queen what your father said. I'm sure she'll want to honour that. If not this year, you can come to Spiritus next year. I'll hold a place for you."
"You don't understand,"
Adrian whispered, his voice catching.
"It's not just that."
Taliesin gripped his hands, leaning in toward him.
"Tell me what I don't understand." "I can't go back. I just can't go back and have to tell my mother and sister how he died. They deserve to know, but I don't want to have to see their faces and know that I should have done something to prevent it. I can't go anywhere in Fell's March without noticing the big hole he left behind. Every time I turn a corner, I'll remember something he said or did, or a story he told. He was like the beating heart of the city, and the King of Arden put a blade right through it. And people will look at me and know I'm the one responsible."
"Do you really think they'll blame you, Mageling?"
"Why shouldn't they? I blame myself. I'll think they're looking at me that way, and every time I'll die a little bit. I'd rather just get it over with."
He was shaking again, whether from grief or fever or what he didn't know. "Have some more tea," Taliesin said softly. "It's not a cure for a broken heart, but it does take the edge off." This time, Adrian drank deeply.
"I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not even looking for you to agree with me. I just want a way out. I just want the pain to stop. If I can't come with you, I'll find a way to end this on my own."
His gaze met hers, and his fingers found the shape of the packet of Geddonweed in his breeches pocket. Adrian could tell that Taliesin understood his meaning immediately, and believed him. She always took him seriously, always treated him like a grown-up, even when he didn't deserve it. It was one of the things he liked about her.
"What if you know something that might help to catch the killers?" she said. "Do you want that knowledge to die with you?"
That was like a punch to the gut. What if?
What if you might be able to prevent another murder?
Or at least avenge the ones that have already happened. That idea, once kindled, was hard to put out. Once at Odin's Ford, he'd be closer to the enemy. And yet, that would mean there would be no escape from the pain any time soon. He tried to think back, to recall if he'd seen or heard anything that might help. But it was like the memory was walled off, too painful to poke at. He reached up and fingered the knot on his head. Had someone hit him over the head? Or had he fallen? Maybe both. He looked down at his hands, picked at his scabbed palms. She sighed.
"About Odin's Ford. School is hard work under the best of circumstances. I want you to have the best chance to succeed. I need you to succeed, if I'm going to persuade the Deans at Mistwork to cooperate with me. I will work hard, Adrian said. I won't disappoint you. For a long moment, Taliesin studied him. Do you really think that would help? To be somewhere else for a while, anyway? I don't know, Adrian said. Maybe. Probably. The tea was kicking in, and his thoughts had become clumsy, aimlessly stumbling into each other. If you feel guilty about your father's death, one way to heal is to help others. She seemed to be trying to convince herself. There are so many people dying needlessly that want to go on living. Saving a life can offset the taking of life. The voyageur noticed his drooping eyelids. Come, she said. Sit down on the bed before you topple over. He moved to the pallet on the floor, then eased into a lying-down position. Taliesin sat on a stool next to him. In truth, it may be safer for you to go south with me and let everyone here think you're dead. You can heal yourself by healing others. Perhaps that's what the Maker intends for you. I don't understand, Adrian said. How does it make sense that the Maker would take my father and Hannah and leave me behind? It's easy to die, Mageling, Taliesin said, stroking his hair. It's staying alive that's hard work. 6. A long fuse. It had been a long time since Jenna Bandelow had been up the road that led to the No. 2 mine. As that one played out, new ones had opened farther west and lower down. There had been changes since 4 years ago when Maggie and Riley had died. Most of the trees were gone now, burned for charcoal to feed the hungry steel mills, or cut down so there wouldn't be cover for ambushes along the road to the garrison house. The Ardenine regulars, everyone called them mudbacks because of their uniforms, had moved the headquarters up here so the soldiers coming and going wouldn't have to pass through the dangerous streets of the city, where soldiers disappeared on a regular basis. 4 years ago, it had been a miserable March day with the sleet pelting down and the wind howling out of the witchy north. Today it was a clear, cold night in October, but the wind still blew, carrying the promise of winter from the fresh snowfalls in the Spirit Mountains. Last time, Jenna had been packed into the wagon with Riley and Maggie, who were about to die, but none of them knew it. This time, she sat high in the driver's seat, with a slightly older boy named Byram beside her. A younger boy rode in the back with the barrels. He called himself Mick. They shouldn't have much to say to each other, but that didn't keep Byram from talking all the way from town. Byram wouldn't be his real name, not if he was smart. He knew Jenna as a boy named Flamecaster. Sometimes she went by Sparks instead. That was just easier all the way around. It had been so long since she'd been a girl that she wasn't sure she remembered the ins and outs of it. Jenna preferred to keep her mouth shut and play her cards close. That way, if any of them was caught, they wouldn't have much to say to the blackbirds either. When she wasn't on Patriot business, Jenna answered to the name of Riley Collier, a skilled blaster from the Heartfangs. She rotated from mine to mine, boring the blasting holes, packing them with powder and setting them off, moving rock off the coal seams so the miners could get at them. It was a good job, for a mining job, if you had steady hands and the nerve to do it. Unlike some of the other jobs, it didn't require a lot of muscle. It also wasn't so strenuous that you were fit for nothing else when you went off shift. Her days were shorter, with nobody looking over her shoulder, because none of the bosses was eager to go down there with her. It allowed more time in the fresh air, less underground, and she'd learned useful skills she would be using tonight. They were nearing the turnoff to the garrison house when Byram said, "Hold up." Jenna reined in, and he stuffed some papers into her hand. "Here's your paperwork in case we get stopped. We got flour and oil for the kitchen, see? If it's clear when we get to the bridge, turn the wagon around and pull onto the shoulder. Soon as you come to a stop, Me and Mick will roll the barrels under the bridge and light it up. Once it blows, we'll hop on and hit the road. Take it nice and easy, though, 'cause we don't want to get noticed. Got that?"
For some reason, Byram fancied that he was in charge. Jenna got it, but she didn't like it. The upside of traveling at Darkman's hour was that there wasn't much traffic on the road. The downside was that once the bridge blew, they'd be prime suspects to any soldiers who happened to be on that side of the bridge, especially since they'd be driving away when any other person would head for the noise to see what happened.
"We'll be the only ones on the road, except for mudbacks and blackbirds. Once the bridge goes up, they'll be all over us, with no place to hide."
Byram snorted.
"What's the chance there'll be mudbacks this side of the bridge in the middle of the night?" "Not mudbacks so much as blackbirds. From what I hear, that new commander's mean as a snake. I want to be far away when it blows." "If you're scared, you should have stayed at home," Byram said. "If you're not scared, you're stupid." "Look," Byram said in the manner of someone instructing a small child. "Somebody's got to light the thing. After that, we got no more'n a couple of minutes."
His eyes narrowed.
"Or are you thinking me or Mick should stay behind while you beat it back to town?"
Jenna shook her head.
"I brought this."
She pulled a long, thin tube out of her carry bag. It was made of cotton coated with pitch and stuffed with black powder.
"What's that?"
Byram poked it warily with his forefinger.
"Something new. Blasters in the hot fangs are beginning to use them in the deeper shafts. Light one end, and it takes as long as half an hour to burn through." "I never heard of that,"
Byram said, as if that was that. It would help if you talked less and listened more, Jenna thought.
"I heard about it from a collier who was passing through town on his way north,"
she said vaguely. She didn't care to reveal her sources to anyone who might spill.
"How do we know it'll actually work?" Byram said. "We don't even know how to use it." "You don't. I do. You get the kegs down there. I'll handle it," Jenna said.
She slapped the reins and they rolled forward again. Her heart was beginning to hammer, as it always did during this kind of job. She tried not to think about what would happen if they got caught. Instead, she thought about Riley and Maggie, who were dead, and her Da, and everyone else in Delphi, squirming under Arden's thumb. She thought of Arden going up in flames, leaving nothing but a charred skeleton behind. That always gave her the heart to do what she did. They turned off the main road toward the garrison headquarters. It was in a manor house the army had taken over when they moved out of the town. Now the army encampment spread on both sides of the road, and squat, ugly warehouses had been raised behind the stables and the manor kitchen. There were still bits of what must have been a garden around the building, but it had been trampled into mud by men and horses. A few winter-blasted shrubs still framed the house. All of this was encircled by a high stone wall. The wall was new. It seemed that the garrison's young commander, Halston Madelon, had grown tired of hit-and-run attacks. The military road crossed the river midway between the main road and the wall. Jenna drove across the bridge, found a wide place to turn around, crossed back, and pulled over. Mick and Byram wrestled 4 kegs of powder off the back of the wagon. They hauled them down to the water's edge. Jenna set the brake on the wagon and scrambled down after them, her carry bag slung over her shoulder.
"Mick, you go up and keep a lookout,"
she said, though she'd have rather sent Byram. With him looking on, smirking and rolling his eyes, she was more fumble-fingered than usual, so it took longer than she expected to get everything tied together. 2 kegs on either end of the bridge, each with its own fuse. Kindling a spark, she lit both fuses.
"These should go off at about the same time," she said. "I just don't know how long we have." "Maybe we should wait and see if it actually works," Byram said. "You can wait if you want," Jenna said, beginning the climb back to the road. "I'm the one with the wagon, and I'm heading back to town."
After a moment, she heard Byram following after her. They scrambled back up the bank to where Mick waited with the wagon. Back in the driver's seat, Jenna released the brake and flicked the reins, and they began their descent toward the main road. The horses knew they were heading back home, so it was hard to keep them reined in. Before they reached the intersection, they saw a dozen riders galloping toward them from the main road.
"Scummer,"
Mick muttered. Mick never said much, and when he did, it was usually scummer. As the riders drew closer, Jenna could see that they rode black horses with silver fittings and wore black capes over their black tunics and gray breeches.
"Blackbirds,"
Jenna muttered and thought, scummer.
"Blackbirds?"
Byram squinted at them.
"There's no way you can tell, that far away in the dark." "My eyes are better than yours," Jenna said. "You wait."
Before long, there was no question who was riding hot toward them. Jenna would have preferred mudbacks, who'd leave you alone if you didn't get in their way. Most of them were reluctant recruits from the Down Realms, or mercenaries with no axe to grind. They just wanted to survive their time in the north and go back home. Blackbirds were the king's personal enforcers in the Empire, known to be as cruel and ruthless as the king himself. Meanwhile, behind them was a bridge that might blow up any minute. Jenna's heart had been beating fast before, but now it was thumping so hard it seemed the blackbirds couldn't help but hear it. Byram shifted on the seat beside Jenna as if he might launch himself into the dirt at the side of the road.
"Don't you move,"
Jenna said, gripping Byram's forearm, digging in her nails for emphasis.
"You can't outrun them, and there's nothing looks guiltier than running away. And keep your mouth shut."
Byram bobbed his head, his face pasty in the moonlight. He seemed more than willing to shut up now. The troop of blackbirds surrounded their wagon, blocking the way. One of them nudged his horse in closer, so that when Jenna looked sideways, his black boots were all that she could see. She looked straight forward, gripping the reins hard, trying to keep her teeth from chattering. There was one thing in their favor. Being scared of the King's Guard wasn't unusual. It would have been more suspicious if they hadn't been nervous.
"It's late to be out on the road,"
the blackbird said. Something about his velvet voice made Jenna's hair stand up on the back of her neck.
"Yes, sir,"
she said.
"Would you care to explain it?" We was bringing dry goods to the kitchen yonder."
Jenna nodded toward the garrison house.
"In the middle of the night?"
Jenna nodded, her gaze fixed on the wagon team.
"Look at me, boy."
Jenna looked up at the blackbird. His eyes were like twin coals set into his skull, or maybe more like marbles set over a straight nose and an almost lipless mouth. He was completely hairless, no brows or lashes, and his head was smooth as a billiard ball. He wore the insignia of an officer. Scummer, Jenna thought. It's Claremont. Mark Claremont was the commander of the King's Guard in Delphi, the spider that maintained the King's web of control here in the north. He was rumored to have a knack for torture. Once you came into Claremont's hands, you would talk. And when you'd spilled everything, then you would die. Slowly. At least he's not a mage, so he can't spell me to make me tell the truth. Jenna could always tell a mage. They had this peculiar glow about them, to her eyes, though others said they didn't see it. Very few mages ever came to Delphi, and those who did were all in the army or the King's Guard. Jenna suddenly realized that the commander had said something and she'd missed it.
I'm sorry, sir. What was that?" "There's no reason to be frightened,"
Claremont said with a smile. He put his hand on her shoulder. When she flinched, he tightened his grip. She didn't like him touching her, but didn't dare fight back. Now she was the one who was tempted to bolt blindly without a plan.
"What's your name?"
Claremont said.
"Monroe, sir."
To Jenna's surprise, the lie spilled right out. So you could tell lies to the breaker after all.
"Monroe. That's an unusual name."
His voice had an odd, soothing quality. Byram was staring at him like a rabbit at a hawk. Jenna kicked his shin to bring him back to his senses.
"Tell the truth now. Why are you really out here in the middle of the night?" Claremont said.
She tried another lie.
"We had to come late, 'cause we work in the mine in the daytime, and then there was nobody around, so we had to unload it our own selves. That made us late heading back."
Remembering Byram's papers, she pulled them out and thrust them toward him.
"Here's our papers."
Claremont made no move to take them.
"Doesn't day shift in the mine start in just a few hours?" "That's why we're in a hurry," Jenna said. "Elsewise we won't get any sleep at all."
Claremont gave her a long, searching look, then released her shoulder, settling back into his saddle, frowning as if he didn't know what to make of her.
"What about you?" Claremont said to Byram. "Do you have anything to say?" "No, sir," Byram croaked.
Turning to the other blackbirds, Claremont said,
"Search the wagon."
That didn't take long, because there wasn't much to see, except Mick huddled in a corner, ready to piss himself. Still, it seemed like a lifetime to Jenna, who sat shoulders hunched, waiting for the blast that would signal the end of the world. Finally, the blackbirds jumped down from the wagon.
"There's nothing, sir,"
one said. Claremont rubbed his chin, squinting at her like he was fascinated.
"Your eyes," he said, "are an unusual color, like old gold or candlelight through honey."
The way he said it gave her the crawls. She didn't like him noticing anything about her. It made her glad she was dressed as a boy.
"Sir,"
one of the blackbirds said,
"you want to bring them along and see what the garrison commander says?"
Claremont hesitated, then shook his head.
"No, we've wasted enough time here."
When Jenna still sat frozen, afraid to move, he snapped,
"Are you deaf? Go on, then."
He waved them on down the road. Jenna loosened the reins and slapped them across the broad backs of the horses, and they rattled into motion. Behind her, she heard one of the blackbirds make a rude joke, and the rest of them laughing. Her ears were sharp as her hawk's eyes. Her dog claimed she could hear candy rattle into a jar from a mile away. She heard the horses moving, slowly at first, accelerating into a drumbeat that dwindled as the distance between them grew.
"Scummer,"
Mick whispered. Beside her, Byram let out a long, shuddering sigh. All of his cockiness had drained away. As they mounted a small rise, Jenna reined in the horses and looked back. The moon had risen yet higher, and the riders cast long shadows behind them as they reached the bridge. Even at that distance, Jenna could hear the faint clatter of hooves as they hit the decking. Byram stirred beside her.
"Well," he said, clearing his throat, "that was a close call. Guess it's just as well it didn't work. If that bridge had blown, we'd be on our way to jail."
"Hang on." Jenna watched as the last of the blackbirds rode onto the bridge. She saw a glare of light, oddly silent, followed by a distant boom, and then another right on its heels. The bridge crumbled, pitching men and horses into the gorge, leaving a jagged hole where the span had been. A plume of dust rose, glittering. On the far side of the bridge, a small cluster of survivors spurred forward, collecting at the edge of the cliff. A primitive joy filled the void inside Jenna that had opened when Maggie and Riley died. Jenna tried not to think too hard about why she liked to blow things up and watch them burn. Byram hooted and pounded Jenna on the back, his skepticism forgotten.
"Did you see that, Flamecaster? Did you see it?"
Even Mick was grinning broadly. Jenna was glad the surviving blackbirds were on the far side of the bridge. She couldn't tell whether Claremont was among them, but she had a feeling he was. He'd seen them. He'd seen all three of them, and now he'd be looking for them. With any luck, though, he'd be looking for a boy named Monroe. 7. Odin's Ford.
You never come to see me these days unless you're on your way to kill someone, Taliesin said.
That was close enough to the truth that Ash didn't dispute it. The voyageur had her back to him, had not so much as looked at him, but she always seemed to know him by his step or the smell of him, or because he was so simple and she so clever that she could tell what he was likely to do on any given day.
I'm a second year at Mistwork now, Ash said. There's much more work than last year. The masters and the deans keep us busy.
I see, Taliesin said. She squatted barefoot between the rows of carrots, expertly lifting them with her digging fork and sliding them into her carry bag. Taliesin Bogard might be Dean of Spiritus, but she never put on airs. The contrast between the healer and the humblest master at mistwork was striking. Wizards were arrogant by nature, and Taliesin had her feet planted firmly in the earth. Ash had been fighting his private war on Arden every summer since his father's murder. Every marching season he traveled the south, working as an itinerant farrier. Farriers were welcome everywhere they went, in army camps, in cities, at every farm along the way, in the stables of the highest-ranking thanes. Everywhere there were horses. Farriers didn't excite suspicion like other strangers did. Most had to travel from place to place in order to find work. It was a natural fit for Adam Freeman, a native of Tamron. Young as he was, his work was top of the line, and so his services were in great demand. He was good with horses, after all. He was also good with poisons, garrots, and the small daggers known as shivs. Poisons were his weapons of choice. Courtesy of Taliesin, he used compounds no one had ever heard of, that no southern healer would ever detect. It helped that green magic was considered witchery in Arden, and so was forbidden. Even if his poisons were identified, it was always too late anyway. Once he got to someone, they were already dead. By then, young Adam Freeman would be on his way somewhere else, trailing death and misery in his wake. Often it was one of the nobility, perhaps a thane who supported the king. It might be a commander or a general, or a blackbird who was known to be especially cruel. Sometimes an entire column of mercenaries took sick and were unable to march north for weeks. The summer sickness, they called it, guessing that it might be caused by mosquitoes. An encampment of recruits would break out with pustules that drove them absolutely mad with itching, or a severe dysentery that had them in the privy for days. That was attributed to bad water. When all else failed, Adrian resorted to his array of blades. He preferred to avoid bloodshed, because that left no doubt that there had been an enemy in their midst. He rarely took the life of a line soldier if it could be avoided, since many were unwilling recruits from the captive realms. It wouldn't make much of a difference strategically anyway. The King of Arden viewed them as expendable. He never targeted the horses either. For one thing, it would draw attention to his work as a farrier. For another, he preferred horses to most people.
"This is not your usual hunting season," Taliesin said. "I thought I'd try something new. In the summertime, the southerners I want to kill are all in the fells, killing northerners. In autumn, I might find them at home."
She finally turned to face him, shading her eyes against the declining sun. The sun was at his back, and his long shadows slanted across the rows.
"You've grown so tall, mageling, in these 4 years," she said, as if she hadn't really looked at him for a while. "And handsome. Are you taller than your father was?" "I don't know. It's hard for me to remember now."
That was a lie. He remembered exactly the measure of his father's arm around his shoulders, the distance between them when he leaned down to speak at Ash's level. Even the scent of him, leather and sweat and fresh mountain air.
"Other men your age come to me seeking love potions."
She looked him up and down again.
"I suppose you're not in need of those."
"No," he said, shifting from foot to foot. Taliesin still had the power to put him off balance. She was the closest thing he'd had to a mother since coming south. A mother who was nobody's fool.
"Quit fondling that jinx piece," Taliesin snapped. "It makes me edgy."
Witches had no use for amulets. She wiped sweat from her brow with her forearm, leaving a smear of dirt, then tossed a digging stick at him and pointed with her fork.
"Here, finish that row."
Idle hands made her edgy, too. Ash squatted next to her. He was in a hurry, but he knew better than to rush his longtime teacher. There was a price to be paid for access to Taliesin's vast inventory of plants and expertise in poisons.
"Where are you off to this time?"
Taliesin said. She seemed to have a talent for breaking into his black moods.
"Me? I'll be in the Southern Islands, studying in the Library of the Arcane, and collecting herbs for the healing halls." "Where will you be, really?"
"It's better if you don't know," Ash said. Though she'd never admit it, he knew that she worried whenever he was away.
"They killed your father, and now you're killing them. What makes you different from them?"
It was part of their bargain that he would listen to these lectures now and then.
"They fired the first bolt," Ash said. "If they'd stayed in the south and left us alone, I'd have no quarrel with them." "Poison is such a scattershot technique," Taliesin said. "You never know where your bolt will land." "I know that, but I'm careful, and I'm good at what I do. I had the best teacher."
If he thought he was offering an olive branch, she slapped it away.
"I did not teach you to travel about, leaving death in your wake," she snapped. "I thought you intended to heal yourself by healing others." "I do heal others, 3 seasons of the year. As for the rest, that's a public health measure. Consider how many premature deaths I'm preventing. The lives I take are balanced by those I save." "You should stay here and work with me," Taliesin said. "You may not think it, but you still have much to learn."
She paused for a response, but he said nothing.
"The time will come when you will wish that you were a better healer."
Ash thrust his stick into the soil with vicious jabs.
"Teach me how to bring the dead back to life. Then I'll stay and listen."
That shut her up for a while. Finally, she said, "I may be gone when you return." "Really?" Ash frowned at her, thinking she must be bluffing, trying to persuade him to stay at school.
"Where are you going?"
"It's better if you don't know," Taliesin said, getting her own poke in. "A better question is why."
"All right. Why are you going away?"
Ash said, gritting his teeth, knowing that Taliesin was right. She always had something to teach him, even when she was giving him a hard time. Especially when she was giving him a hard time. Taliesin sat back on her heels, resting her forearms on her knees.
"Something has changed. There is danger here, like a noose, tightening around us."
"Not here at the academy," Ash said.
"Yes, here. I don't know that the gifted will be safe here for too much longer."
"Really?" Ash found this hard to believe. With Arden on one side and the vassal state of Tamron on the other, the academy at Odin's Ford remained an oasis of neutrality, a real sanctuary from the ongoing wars. No doubt Mistwork, the wizard school, presented a tempting target to Arden's mage handlers, and the Temple School had never towed the Ardenine line when it came to history and religion. The reputation of the faculty kept outsiders away. The most powerful wizards, the fiercest, best-trained warriors, the cleverest engineers, the most skilled healers, many returned to the Ford to teach. The academic houses didn't agree on much, but they all took a dim view of any attack on its sovereignty. The peace of Odin's Ford had persisted for 500 years. The war in the north barely merited a footnote in its history.
"Would you like some advice?"
Taliesin said, lancing into his thoughts again.
"No."
Like usual, she ignored him.
You have a rare talent, sul'Harlan, especially for a mage. I've never seen the likes of it. It's a shame to waste it this way. This is not what I had in mind when I agreed to teach you. This is not what I had in mind for a life, Ash thought. Oh well. But Taliesin wasn't finished. Some creatures were made for murder. Her hand shot out into the row of carrots and came up gripping a wriggling adder. She broke its neck and tossed it into the carry bag too. You were not. You cannot stand astride the line between good and evil, life and death for long. It will destroy you. Isn't that what a healer does? Ash said, drawn into the debate in spite of himself. We follow our patients into the borderlands, where life and death meet. Aye, we do, Taliesin said, and then we either turn them around or gently help them across. Her eyes narrowed and her voice sharpened. We do not give them a push. Aren't you the one who always says that it's easier to prevent a problem than to treat it? I have said that, Taliesin admitted, but I was right there when my father was murdered, Ash said. I was right there, and yet there was nothing I could do. What I learned that day was that healing has its limits. There is never a shortage of killers. Any brute with a club in his hand would do, but a good healer is hard to find. Taliesin rose gracefully to her feet, settling the bag of vegetables on her ample hip. You need to find a way to let go of your anger. Leave Odin's fort while you still can. Go home and be the healer that you are meant to be. Right now, there are advantages to being dead. No expectations, no obligations, no restrictions. It gives me the freedom to do what I have to do. You don't stop being who you are just because you've run away. I'll go home eventually. If you live that long. Now, what is it you've run out of this time? Finally, the lecture was over. Ash had his list ready. Geddonweed, Black Adder, Sweet Misery, Doll's Eyes and Wolfsbane, Sweet Forgetting. For witnesses, Ash said. Despite what you think of me, I try to keep bloodshed to a minimum. I don't know why you always come to me, Taliesin grumbled. Your decoctions, infusions, and tisanes are as good as mine. They're good, Ash allowed, just not as good. Besides, I'm in a hurry. You are always in a hurry these days, Taliesin said, but she'd already surrendered. All right, then. Come with me. Ash handed her his carry bag and followed her into her cabin, breathing in the fumes from the pots that simmered on her wood stove all year round. He wrinkled his nose at something new, a foul stench that made his eyes water. Did something die in here? Those are the eels I'm having for supper, Taliesin said. You're welcome to stay. It didn't take long for her to put Ash's kit together, once she quit stalling. Still, by the time he left her cabin in Tamron Wood, following the road back to school, it was nearly dark. Though the weather was still warm, the sunny southern days were growing shorter. The scent of night-flowering spice lily hung like lust in the air, just one more sign that the season was turning. This is the dying time, Ash thought, morbid to the bone. You've got to stop thinking so much. It's the end of term, after all. In fact, he'd been through a series of grueling exams that day. He was magically depleted and bone-weary, and he wanted to make an early start the next day. Still, he knew from experience that it might not be easy to escape into the oblivion of sleep. He entered the academy by the postern gate, treading the well-worn path through the park, used by countless students on their way to and from mischief. Just past the gate, he turned down the path toward Stokes, the Proficient's dormitory, which housed senior-level students from several academic houses.
He was considered a fourth year, having spent 2 years at Spiritus, the Healer's Academy, and 2 at Mistwork. His father and mother had schooled together here, back before the war. His mother had spent a year at Wien House, the school that drew would-be warriors from throughout the 7 realms. His father had attended Mistwork, the school for wizards, or mages as they were called in the South, usually coupled with fear and loathing. The entire campus, with its green lawns and time-buffed stone buildings, had the look of a temple school at home if you overlooked the gritty bits, such as the taverns and inns on Bridge Street. The bridge would already be crowded with students, eager to celebrate the end of term and the beginning of the interregnum. What would his parents have been like back then, before they'd suffered so many losses? Ash guessed it must have been a carefree time. It was just then that he felt a presence, like cold water trickling between his shoulder blades, or a cadaver's hand on the back of his neck. He instinctively turned sideways to present a smaller target, gripped his amulet, and looked back along the path. The academy grounds were heavily wooded, and the moon shrouded in clouds. He could barely make out the darker shapes of the trees on either side of the gray strip of flagstone path. The gloomy undergrowth beneath could hide an army. It was probably not an army, but someone was definitely out there, watching him. Several someones. They weren't gifted, Ash guessed, or they would show up better in the dark. It was his own gift, and their need, that told him they were there. It was only when he closed his eyes that he could see them, like deeper holes in the shadows. Ash had been trained to discern disorder in others. Had they not been so hungry, he might not have noticed them. They were like lanterns with no light inside. Ash was more curious than worried. He wasn't the most powerful wizard, or the most skilled fighter at the ford, but when it came to predators, he was likely near the top of the local food chain. Ash took 2 steps back toward the shadowed border of the trees, meaning to take a closer look, then froze as he sensed the excitement rippling through the watchers. Not fear, but greed and anticipation, as if they were a pack of high-country wolves with the scent of blood in their noses. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The breeze freshened and the leaves shivered. The moon freed itself from its wrapping of clouds, and light cascaded onto the path. Nearby an owl spoke, and then its blunt shape passed silently overhead. Still, the watchers waited in the woods. A small group of students passed by them on the path, and they didn't stir from their hiding places. Holes in the darkness. Lanterns. Or wolves. Right. Taliesin had him seeing ghosts and monsters. One thing for sure, there were fewer ghosts and monsters at the ford than where he was headed. 8. Hello and goodbye. Reaching Stokes Hall, Ash trudged up the well-worn stone steps to the 2nd floor. From all appearances, the dormitory was deserted. Everyone would be at the bridge by now. He pushed open his door and pointed at the reading lamp, and it blazed into light. He frowned, rocked on his heels, and scanned the room. Someone's been in here. It was hard to explain. The furnishings were simple: a bed, a dry sink with a pitcher, a desk and chair, the table by the door, a bookcase lined with precious books, a battered chest for his clothes. Although the arrangement of objects appeared to be random, there was a design and power in it, a charm of protection that gently redirected an intruder, turning him away without his realizing it. Ash always placed the spell instinctively. It was something he'd done since he was a boy, since his father had taught it to him. Back then it served to keep his younger sister out of his private things. But now the pattern was disturbed. Items had been picked up and shifted in subtle ways. Doors in the student quarters were rarely kept locked. No one had much worth stealing, though borrowing was common, as long as you left a note. There was no note, but then nothing seemed to be missing. What was most disturbing was that his charm hadn't worked to keep them out. He couldn't help thinking about Talison's warning. I don't know that the gifted will be safe here for too much longer. But there were plenty of gifted at Odin's Ford, prominent teachers and practitioners. There was no reason anyone would target him. As far as students and faculty at the Ford knew, he was Ash Hansen, son of a minor landowner in the Borders. The only person at the Ford who knew his real identity was Taliesin. Still, he went back to the door and locked it, then crossed to the hearth, lifted a loose stone, and retrieved the leather case locked with charms, whose padded pockets and compartments were filled with vials, bottles, and pouches of death. Everything was just as he'd left it. He released a sigh of relief. Maybe it was good he was leaving tomorrow. The voyageur had made him jumpy. He replenished his supplies with the herbs Taliesin had given him, working quickly and methodically, like a warrior arming himself for battle. Ash pulled his drawer out from under his bed and laid out his travel gear. Weapons, his bow, arrows, small sword, the small daggers called shivs that his father had favored. The kit bag with an array of medicinals, surgical tools, dressings, and the like. Another bag containing tools for his work as a traveling farrier and healer of horses. His bedroll, cooking pots, small packets of upland teas, herbs, and seasonings for the road. The mingled scents brought the usual rush of memory. Another year gone. Though he'd told Taliesin that he preferred being off the map, he couldn't help thinking about the family he had left. Liz would be 15, preparing for her name day on her 16th birthday. They'd been close. The gulf between 11 and 13 wasn't so large, and they were both spares in the royal hierarchy. Did she still miss him the way he missed her? 4 years is a long time when you're 11 years old, especially when you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. Would she have boys buzzing around her by now, the way Hannah always did? What kind of queen would she be? From what he remembered, she'd be happier playing the basilka or the harpsichord. After Hannah died, he'd promised Liz he'd help her, that he'd be there for her when she came to the throne, that she wouldn't have to manage on her own. That promise still sat heavily on his conscience. He could still keep his promise, he told himself. There was still time. She wasn't queen yet. But there was no telling how he would be received. He wouldn't blame her if she slammed the door in his face. As far as he knew, his mother had not remarried, though he guessed there would be pressure to do so. An unmarried queen was an opportunity for alliances, something the Fells desperately needed. He preferred not to think about it. Still, more and more, he longed for home. He wanted to climb out of the cloying, sweet southern air into the clean, pine-scented mountains, a place where the northern winds needled the nose and cleared the head for thinking, a place that, even now, would be filling with snow. If wishes were horses, even beggars would ride. It was something his paternal grandmother used to say, the one who burned to death in a stable long before Ash was born. His father often told stories about life on the streets of Fellsmarch, trying to make that piece of his heritage real to him. "I never knew my Da," he'd said. "I want you to know yours." Ash sorted quickly through his single trunk of clothing. He'd leave behind his heavy winter cloak, woven of upland sheep's wool, spun in the grease to turn the rain and snow. He'd bring his warm-weather rain gear, beaded and stitched with clan charms. Clan goods were treasured throughout the 7 realms, so that wouldn't mark him out as a northerner. Studying his shelves of books, Ash chose 2. One was Tisdale's, the green magic handbook he'd used since his arrival in Odin's Ford. The other was a small, battered volume bound in leather, a guide to poisons. Taliesin had given it to him, but not without making her opinions known. With everything assembled, he quickly stowed his supplies in 2 panniers, distributing the weight as evenly as he could. When all was ready, Ash considered taking advantage of the deserted dormitory to carry his panniers to the stables and stow them there. In the end, he returned them to the drawer under the bed. He didn't want to risk their being discovered in the unlikely event the stable boys mucked out the stalls again before he left. Just as he got his gear stowed away, there came a knock at the door.
"Ash, it's Lila."
That would be Lila Barrowhill, a Southern Islander cadet from Wean House, the military school.
"It's open,"
Ash said.
"No, it's not."
"Oh." Ash unlocked the door and swung it open. Lila stalked past him and dropped into a chair like she owned the place. In fact, he might not have recognized her without an introduction. She'd replaced her dun-colored Wean House uniform with a long blue skirt and a close-fitting blouse that exposed her shoulders and set off her dark skin. Her tangle of curls was pinned up and she rouged her lips.
"How come your door was locked?" "I didn't realize it was,"
Ash said, sitting down on the bed. Lila was one of a handful of Southern Islanders at Wean House. Most attended either the Temple School or Eisenwerk, the engineering school. She looked to be of mixed blood, actually, and she spoke several languages fluently, including Felsian. Up to this year, they'd rarely crossed paths. Wean House was on the opposite side of the river from Mistwork. Lila also seemed to spend considerable time away from school. He'd heard that she'd been expelled several times, but always talked her way back in. Lila spent every spare moment in the dining halls, the taverns, the gymnasium, anywhere people gathered, played cards and darts, drank, ate, gossiped, and flirted. Ash had no idea when she got her studying done, but she seemed to do middling well in her classes with very little effort. Ash had little time for socializing between his doubled class schedule and the time he spent in the healing halls and studying with Taliesin. Besides, he was a loner at heart. Now that Ash was a proficient and Lila a cadet in Wean House, they'd ended up in the same dormitory. Though they saw more of each other than before, they mixed like oil and water. If anything, Lila seemed to dislike him for some reason. It perplexed him. Granted, he was no charmer, but he got along with most people. He stole another look at Lila, still distracted by the sudden transformation, and wondering what had brought her to his door. Lila caught him staring and said,
"No, Hansen, this is not the scene where the girl puts on a skirt and some paint, and her schoolmate, who's a little thick, suddenly realizes that she is his true love."
"Oh," Ash said.
"Good to know. Just because you're on the market doesn't mean that I am." "What makes you think I'm on the market?" "I saw Susie on Bridge Street earlier. The end-of-term party started mid-afternoon. She wondered where you were."
"Oh, so that's what this is about." Susie was a plebe at Eisenwerk. She and Ash had walked out together for a few months, but had recently called it quits. At least he had.
"I went to see Taliesin, to say goodbye. It took longer than I expected."
"I think Susie was hoping to give you a reason not to go."
When Ash said nothing, Lila growled.
"You broke her heart, you know. The least you can do is talk to her." "I have talked to her. I tried, anyway. I told her up front that I wasn't looking for a long-term sweetheart. I thought we both agreed to that." "Did you make her sign a bloody contract?"
Lila laughed, but there was a bitter edge to it.
"I promise that I won't fall in love with the moody, mysterious Ash Hansen. I will enjoy his rangy body, his broad shoulders, and shapely leg, all the while knowing it's a lease not to buy." "Shapely leg?"
Ash thrust out his leg, pretending to examine it, hoping to interrupt the litany of his physical gifts. But Lila was on a roll.
"I will not fall into those blue-green eyes, deep as twin mountain pools, nor succumb to the lure of his full lips. Well, I will succumb, but for a limited time only. And the stubble. Have I mentioned the stubble?"
Ash's patience had run out. Lila was far too fluent in Felsian for his liking.
"Shut up, Lila." Isn't there anyone who meets your standards?" "At least I have standards." He raised an eyebrow.
"Ouch!" Lila clutched her shoulder. "A fair hit, sir. A fair hit." Her smile faded. "The problem is, hope is the thing that can't be reined in by rules or pinned down by bitter experience. It's a blessing and a curse." For a long moment, Ash stared at her. He would have been less surprised to hear his pony reciting poetry.
"Who knew you were a philosopher?" he said finally. "Now, if you're staying, let's talk about something else. Where's your posting this term?"
"I'm going back to the Shivering Fens," Lila said, "where the taverns are as rare as a day without rain, where you have to keep moving or grow a crop of moss on your ass."
Goodbye, poetry, Ash thought. Sounds lovely. You can't get a better posting?
"Not with my record," Lila said, not meeting his eyes. "But you have a choice. You're going back to Freetown. There aren't enough dusty old libraries and indecipherable manuscripts for you here."
"There's plenty," Ash said, "but they have different dusty old libraries and indecipherable manuscripts in the Southern Islands.
Anyway, I need a change of scenery."
"How will you get there? I hear that Arden has stepped up patrols along the river all the way to Deepwater."
"I'll go via Sand Harbor," Ash said. "It's a little out of the way, but I want to go to the market there anyway."
He schooled his face to display nothing. Drunk or sober, Lila didn't miss much. He shouldn't have worried. Lila was already restless, shifting in her seat, on to the next thing. "Listen," she said. "Reynard Tourant is hosting an after-hours party over at the Turtle and Fish. Everything's bound to be top shelf. Want to come?" Ash stared at her, surprised. Lila had long since given up inviting him to parties.
"Not if it means spending time with Tourant."
"Aw, come on," Lila said. "It's not that late, and you've scarcely come out with us all term."
"I've been busy."
Ash slid a sideways look at Lila,
wondering if Susie would happen to be at this party too.
"Anyway, given Tourant's reputation, I'm surprised you'd want to go."
"I can take care of myself," Lila said, which was certainly true. "It might be my last chance to spend an evening with drunken Ardenine swine, for a while. Besides, Tourant insists on introducing me to some rising star in the Ardenine army."
"If he's a rising star, then what's he doing here?"
Lila shrugged. "Maybe he wants to recruit me. Wait till he finds out I don't have the right equipment."
"What do you mean?"
Lila slapped at the front of her skirt. "And here, I'm not a man." Ash rolled his eyes.
"If I didn't know better, I'd think you preferred the company of swine."
At this point, he was being just about as disagreeable as he knew how. "A girl can learn a lot from a drunken Southerner," Lila said, bestowing that familiar, tight-lipped smile that could mean anything at all.
"Well, I've got better things to do, like sleep."
"You should come," Lila persisted. "Tourant's invited everyone from Brocker and Stokes, so it won't be a totally Ardenine crowd. At least it'll be diluted a bit."
"You're welcome to stay here with me," Ash said, knowing what her answer would be. "We could read Askell and Verne and discuss military campaigns during the Wizard Wars."
No," Lila said, making a face. "I'm done with textbooks for now."
"Give my regards to Tourant, then," Ash said. "Tell him I hope he's less of a bunghole next year."
"Suit yourself," Lila said, "but don't say I didn't warn you. It'll be a graveyard here at Stokes tonight." 9. Tourant's Party. The coin was still piling up. Felsian girlies and Tamric double eagles and Ardenine steelies, so called because people doubted there was really any silver in them these days. Even a few coppers from those unwilling to put real money on the table. There were 2 piles. Some bet on Lila Barrowhill, others on Renard Tourant, the class commander. Lila noticed with some satisfaction that her pile was bigger. She spent a lot of time in the Turtle and Fish, and the regulars knew better than to bet against her. She was known to have a high tolerance for intoxicants and a lot of demons to drown. Those who bet on Tourant were only brown-nosing, and they stood to lose. Tourant had secured a table next to the kegs, so he could play the gracious host. His father was a high-up in the Ardenine army, which meant he had a paved road to the top. All of the high-ups in the Ardenine army were men, because in Arden, apparently, there were no competent women. The class commander fancied himself a ladies' man. Lila suspected he took his standard-issue Wean House uniforms to a tailor, because they always had a custom fit. He also sported one of those ridiculous tiny mustaches that probably take hours to achieve, but that look like a shaving mistake. Around them seethed a sea of dun-colored uniforms, just like her own, save the markings of rank. It was nearly all Wean House, nearly all Arden, with just a splash of mistwork black here and there. No temple white at all, which was probably a good thing. "Is everything on the table?" Lila said, looking around for more takers. "All right, then. You ready?" she said, looking across the table at Tourant. The commander nodded, his face shiny with sweat, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his ale. "Hey now," Lila said, grinning. "No worries. I'll cover your tab out of my winnings." He flushed russet. "Go," he said, tipping back his head, gulping noisily. Lila shook back her hair, opened her throat, and poured the ale down. She thunked down her glass moments before Tourant did. "You lose," she said, scooping up her share of the money, leaving enough on the table to cover the drinks. This was timely, at least. She'd been thinking she'd need some traveling money. Tourant slammed his hands down on the table, going white with fury. Funny how he could change colors like that. You! Turning away, he scooped up a fresh tankard, drew off some ale from a smallish keg, then thrust it into Lila's face. "Try this one. Lieutenant Rochefort brought it all the way from Ardenscourt." "Did he now? Does he have his own brewery? Raising a little money for the war effort?" Lila accepted the tankard with the exaggerated care of someone who's a bit lushy already. Peering into it, she saw a muddy brown brew with a rather musty nose to it. Not as top shelf as she'd expected. She looked up to find Tourant watching her. "Where is this Lieutenant Rochefort, anyway?" she said. "I'm eager to meet him." "He'll be here," Tourant said. "Soon. He had some business to attend to." He gestured toward the ale. "What do you think?" Lila made a show of gulping some down, then wiped her mouth with her sleeve. "It's quite complex, isn't it?" she said. "Indeed," Tourant said, smirking. "It's not the usual Tamric swill." His gaze shifted so that he was looking over Lila's shoulder. "Here's Rochefort now. You can thank him in person." Lila swung around, coming face to face with the newcomer. In contrast to Tourant's plumage, the visitor's clothing was finely made but subdued, without the markings of rank. He had a lean, sinuous build and fine-boned artist's hands. His skin was pale and unmarked, as if it had never seen sunlight. His eyes were hazel, oddly pale under thick, dark lashes, and his hair was the same color as his ale. Blood and bones, she thought. Destin Carn. What are you doing here? "Lila Barrowhill, may I introduce Lieutenant Dennis Rochefort," Tourant said, seeming eager to make it a three-way. "Lieutenant, this is Cadet Barrowhill, the one I told you about." His eye twitched, and Lila realized that Tourant was trying to wink and not quite succeeding. Lila had been working with Destin Carn for 2 years now, long enough to know that the younger Karn was a chameleon of a man who could play any part, who could take on the colors of his surroundings, just as he was doing at that very moment. She just wasn't sure who the real Karn was. Destin's father, Marin Karn, was commander of the Ardenine army and of the military campaigns against Tamron, Delphi, and the Fells. He was the architect of Arden's captive mage program, in which they used flashcraft collars to force wizards to fight alongside them. Both Karns were wizards who had found a way to survive and thrive in a land that despised magic. Naturally, they'd managed to avoid taking the collar themselves.
"Pleased to meet you, Lieutenant Rochefort," Lila said, putting on a fierce, brilliant smile that said she wasn't pleased at all.
Setting her ale on the table, she extended her hand. Destin hesitated, as if worried about her intentions, then took it. His palm was smooth, uncalloused, and delivered a definite sting of wizardry. Magic was the weapon he wielded on behalf of his king. Destin kept hold of her hand, his eyes fixed on Lila.
"Turant was right,"
he murmured, his lips twitching with amusement.
"You are quite lovely. Such an exotic mingling of races. We don't have officers like you at home."
Lila bit back the first retort that came to mind. "No," she said, withdrawing her hand. "You don't." Destin was having fun at Turant's expense. Always a good thing, but that didn't excuse his showing up here like this. She needed to get rid of Turant so they could have a heart-to-heart. "While we're on the subject of physical gifts," Lila said loudly, "I must point out Proficient Turant's very impressive ass. Nobody fills his breeches like he does. Turn around, Turant, and give the lieutenant a look." Lila described a circle in the air with her forefinger and raised her eyebrows. Horror and rage chased embarrassment across Turant's face.
"And did you notice his skin? It's the color of roasted beets."
The commander backed away, spluttering, unable to manage a suitable retort. "You forgot your ale?" Lila thrust a mug at him. Turant took it and slunk away. Destin's eyes followed Turant's retreat. Then he looked back at Lila, grimacing.
"Is it politically astute to antagonize your class commander?"
Meaning Turant.
"I've never been accused of being politically astute," Lila said.
"Turant should know better than to engage with you."
"He should, but he does not," Lila said. "Just as you should know better than to come here."
She added loudly,
"So what brings you to Odin's Ford, Lieutenant? Is the marching season really over in Arden?"
"It's always the marching season in Arden," Destin said,
cradling his mug of ale but not drinking from it.
"The king is a demanding master."
Lila leaned toward him so their faces were inches apart.
"If you're here to see me, you're wasting your time."
"I'm here on other business,"
Destin said, looking away, which raised the question, what other business?
"But as long as I'm here," he went on, "it seemed like a good opportunity to convey a message from our quartermaster. We have an urgent need for as many—"
"I thought I made myself clear. I don't do business here. Never ever. If you want to talk, I'll be heading east in another week or so. You can leave me a message at the 7 Horses on the West Road, or Chauncey's in the city. Let me know how to get in touch with you."
Destin's hand stole to his neckline, then dropped away as he remembered himself.
"Hear me out, at least. The king has made a proposal that I think you'll find—"
"I said no. Is there something you don't understand about no?"
"Is there a problem?"
Somebody's foul breath washed over her, and Lila looked up to find that Turant was back, like a bad dream, and pulling up a chair. He all but fell into it, clunking his mug down on the table. It was nearly empty.
"Turant," Destin said in a low, vicious voice, "go away. The lady and I were having a private discussion."
"Lady?" Turant snorted. "You must be joking.
I can tell you stories about Barrow Hill that would—"
"It's all right," Lila said heartily. "We were done with our discussion anyway. How are you feeling, Turant?" She propped her chin on her fist. "You look a little under the weather."
"Me?"
Turant blinked his bleary eyes as if unable to focus.
You're the one who— How are you feeling?"
Lila shrugged. "I'm fine, but it looks like maybe you should call it a night."
"You're drunk, Turant," Destin said icily. "Why don't you do as she says and go somewhere and sleep it off?"
Turant ran his tongue over his lips, did it again, frowned, pulled his tankard toward him, and sniffed at it. He reached for Lila's, and she pulled it back out of reach. "Keep your hands off my ale," she said. "Go lay down before you fall down." Turant pointed a shaking finger at Lila.
You switched drinks on me."
He turned to Destin, a wounded look on his face.
"Lieutenant Karn,
Karn. It was as if the room had gone silent around them, leaving that one name ringing off the walls. Destin Karn might keep a low profile, but his father's name was known throughout the realms. Karn planted both hands on the table and leaned in toward Turant.
"Imbecile! Have you lost your mind?"
Lila saw death in Destin's face, and wondered how far her own usually reliable Sharp's face had slipped. "Ease up, Lieutenant Rochefort," she said. "Turant's just a little confused is all. He gets that way when he's drinking. No harm done."
"But she switched drinks on me," Turant persisted. "See for yourself."
The cadet shoved his tankard toward Rochefort Karn. The lieutenant snatched it up and hurled it into the fireplace, where it shattered, sending shards of glass flying everywhere. "Temper, temper," Lila thought, picking a sliver of glass out of her arm. Destin seemed to keep a lot of anger bottled within his sleek skin. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Why would I want to switch drinks? And why would it matter anyway, since it all came from the same—" Turant swayed in his seat, wilting before her eyes, then slammed face down on the table. "Really, Turant," Lila thought, "did you think I'd actually fall for the turtled ale trick?" Turant snored on, drool pooling on the table beneath his open mouth. Lila took a quick look around, what she should have been doing all along. All around the room, people were slumped over tables, snoring in corners, sprawled on the floor, with the exception of a dozen Ardenine cadets, hard-faced and totally sober, and they all stood between Lila and the door. "Yeah, you're clever, Lila," she thought, panic flickering through her. "You were so focused on the turtleweed trap that you didn't notice the other one closing around you." "Well, Rochefort," she said casually, as cold sweat trickled down between her shoulder blades. "Who knew that Turant can't hold his ale?"
"Who knew?"
Destin said evenly. Pushing to her feet, Lila crossed to the row of kegs, scanning the room for a way out. Saw none. She turned back toward Destin. "All this talk makes me thirsty. Would you like another?" He shook his head. Lila filled a new cup and set it down on the table, her mind working furiously. It didn't make sense. Arden wouldn't break the peace of Odin's Ford in order to dispose of a black sheep cadet who'd become a valuable Ardenine spy and an important black market supplier. Could they really have nailed her this quickly? If so, she'd underestimated them. Unless she wasn't really the target. Unless they just wanted to keep her and everybody else out of the way long enough to— Bones. Bloody, bloody bones. Ash was the target. Destin was watching her, still as a coiled snake. "Watch my ale," she said. "I'll be right back." Destin's hand shot out and gripped her wrist.
"Sit down, Lila," he said. "Please, stay a little longer."
Let go of me, Karn, or lose the hand. I said I'll be right back.
Where are you going?
To the privy, Lila said. Now let go unless you want me to piss in your lap. Lila could see the indecision in Destin's eyes. She guessed that he and his crew wanted to do whatever they'd come to do and get out without being noticed. She was banking on that.
All right, he said, releasing her wrist. Hurry back. We're not done talking yet.
Maybe you're not, Lila thought, but I am. I just hope I'm not too late. 10. Blood Hunger. Ash awoke from a nightmare into a nightmare. It was the weight on his chest that aroused him, as if someone had placed an anvil there. He opened his eyes to find a man smiling down at him, a man who might have been a demon out of the old stories. His face was framed in the cowl of his rough-woven robe. His pale skin stretched across the bones around the caverns of his eyes and the slash of his mouth. A pendant dangled free at his neck, some kind of amulet. No, it was a tiny gold cup, like the kind used to dose medicines. Something in the man's face reminded Ash of the Canis fungus addicts who lived in the caves in the Spirit Mountains, growing their hallucinatory mushrooms in the dark. Ash tried to lift his hand to move the weight off his chest, and found he couldn't move, not one finger. When he looked down the length of his body, he saw nothing to explain it. He sought his gift and could touch nothing. It was like pumping from a dry well. Nor could he touch the shivs under his pillow or behind the headboard or hidden in the book on his bedside table. The robed man gripped the chain of Ash's serpent amulet, lifted it over his head, and tucked the pendant into his carry-bag. Then he brought out a knife, a wickedly sharp, thin blade, the hilt inscribed with runes and symbols. He waved it before Ash's eyes, making sure he got a good look at it. The man spoke softly, a cadenced Malthusian prayer in Ardenine. Then he switched to the common speech.
Rejoice, mage, for I am a priest of the true church, come to cleanse you of the taint of sorcery.
Ash felt the cold metal of the blade against his arm. A stinging pain told him he'd been sliced. Then, horribly, his attacker lifted Ash's arm to his lips and sucked the blood from the wound. The man shivered, closing his eyes as if it were syrup of poppy. Blood was smeared all around his mouth until he wiped it away with one hand. He uncorked a small bottle and poured something burning into the gash. Ash screamed, but made no sound, struggled and thrashed, but moved not a bit. Sweat pooled beneath the small of his back, soaking the linens under him. The blade man raked a hand through Ash's hair, then lifted the bloody knife, cut a lock away, tied it with a thread, and put it into a little bag at his belt. A trophy. Ash struggled again to move, to raise a wizard flame, to cry for help. Nothing. That was when he realized that he was going to die. The priest drank from the wound again and smiled a beatific smile, his teeth rimed with blood.
I do so wish that we had more time and a private place to do this properly,
he said, running his cold fingers along Ash's collarbone, seeking the pulse point.
I would take you up in small sips, slowly draining you of sin and substance until the mana-in slips away like a whisper in the dark. With a healthy young demon such as yourself, the cleansing ceremony can last for hours.
He sighed.
It's a lovely ritual and a peaceful end.
He sighed again.
But my brothers will be here soon, and then, I'm afraid, it will be something of a feeding frenzy.
As if on cue, Ash heard the door to his room slam open. The priest muttered a curse, and his movements now became quick and purposeful. He grasped Ash's chin and shoved it back and up.
Ash closed his eyes and sent up a prayer to the Maker, expecting the touch of steel at the base of his neck, where the great vein comes close to the surface. The assassin made a new sound, a cross between a grunt of surprise and a gurgle. Something warm and wet splashed across Ash's bare chest, and his chin was suddenly released. He opened his eyes just as his attacker slid sideways onto the bed, his own knife sticking out of his throat.
"Ash!"
Lila's voice was soft and urgent.
"Are you all right? Did he stick you?"
Her face appeared within his field of vision, eyes narrowed with worry. Ash could only stare at her helplessly. Lila sucked in her breath and ran her hands over him, looking for a point of entry. Her hand stopped over his heart.
"What's this?"
The suffocating weight was gone. Ash pushed up on his elbows. Lila was holding something on her palm, like a dark spot. When she passed it under the light from the window, Ash could see it was a stone, a burnt sugar color, veined with crystal.
"It's magic," Ash gasped. "I couldn't move, not a twitch, and it sucked all the magic out of me."
Lila weighed the stone in her hand, then tucked it into her pocket. "Are you hurt otherwise?" Ash shook his head.
"Just my arm. It's nothing."
"Nothing? Where's all the blood coming from, then?" Lila's voice tremored a bit. Ash looked. The sheets where his arm had rested were sodden with blood, and the flesh was ripped from his wrist halfway to his elbow. It was the sort of a wound a person might have made a fuss over in normal circumstances, but just now it seemed unimportant next to his life. He flexed his fingers and found the tendons and nerves intact. Blood still ran freely down his arm, and he pressed it tightly to his side to staunch the bleeding. An anticoagulant, he thought, his training kicking in. They use an anticoagulant to keep the blood flowing.
"He took my amulet," Ash said hoarsely. "It's in his bag, on the floor. There." He pointed. "Can you get it for me?"
"You mages and your amulets,"
Lila said, the relief in her voice unmistakable. She turned away from Ash, knelt on the floor, and rooted in the assassin's carry-bag. Ash saw a flash of movement over Lila's shoulder, someone flying through the doorway, heading his way.
"Lila!"
Ash shouted, using the body of the dead assassin as a shield so that the newcomer buried his blade in the corpse. The newcomer was still trying to free it when Lila slammed into him, sending him flying. He landed hard, his head striking the washstand. Instantly, Lila was on him. She gripped the hilt of her knife with both hands, raised it, and... "Wait!" Ash shouted. The blade was already on its way down, with all Lila's weight behind it, but she somehow managed to turn it so it stuck in the floor next to the man's throat. She swore and yanked the point free, then let it drop until it rested just above the assassin's collarbone. He didn't stir. Lila looked back at Ash. "What?" She sounded wild, bloodthirsty, and completely unfamiliar. Ash shoved the body of the first assassin aside and stood up unsteadily.
"Maybe we should try to find out who they are, and why they're trying to kill me."
Lila stared at him a moment, and then brushed a hand absently across her face, as if to wipe something away, then nodded.
"Right. Why don't you go fetch the dormmasters and provosts, and I'll search these two for clues."
"Fair enough." She produced another dagger from some hiding place and slapped it into Ash's hand. "I'll be right back. If he moves, stick him." Ash stared at the dagger in his hand.
"Actually, I have my own—"
he began, but she was gone. First things first, he pulled on his breeches, then stuck Lila's dagger into the sheath hidden in the waistline. Dropping to his knees, he dug in the first assassin's bag and retrieved his amulet, sliding the chain back around his neck. He palmed the jinx piece, feeling the welcome flow of the magical energy called flash. All he had was what was stored in the pendant. He'd been completely stripped of power. It would take a while to recover. Using his amulet, Ash kindled the lamp next to his bed. He pulled a cloth bandage from his healer's kit and wrapped it snugly around his arm, using his teeth in place of a second hand. A more thorough search of the assassin's carry bag turned up a traveler's edition of the Book of Malthus, a few religious charms, 2 more runed blades, a stoppered bottle, and a wadded-up cloth. Ash spread the cloth out on his washstand, thinking it might be a map or something. It was a handkerchief made out of white Weanhaven cotton, but stained brown with old blood. It was the plain, utilitarian style used at Odin's Ford. In fact, the school's laundry mark was faintly visible in one corner. Ash looked from the handkerchief in his one hand to the pinkish scar that ran across the meat of his thumb on the other. He'd cut himself badly, chopping betony herb a month before. He'd stopped the bleeding with a handkerchief, just like this one. It was not a random attack, then. But why had they come after him? Could Ardenine spies have discovered what he'd been doing with his school vacations? Or worse, had they somehow figured out his true identity? Lila was back, slipping in through the door like a wraith, her sword in her hand. She locked the door behind her, then pulled the window shutters closed and latched them. "There were 3 more in the hall," she said, turning toward Ash. Her hands were covered with blood. Her face was splattered with it as well, like a dark rash, and perhaps the whole front of her, although it was hard to tell with her back to the lamp.
3 more?
Ash stared at her.
What did you...
"I killed them," she said, rubbing her neck. "What a mess. It's so hard to find that sweet spot between the... Anyway, sorry, so let's hope this one has something to say." She nudged the man on the floor with her boot. He groaned.
"I thought you went to get the dorm masters and provosts."
"The dorm masters are dead," Lila said wearily. "Here at Stokes, anyway. They must have killed them on their way in. 2 provosts as well." The news was like a punch in the gut. After 4 years, it was hard to let go of the notion that this was a place of safety, with rules, and people to enforce them. He'd become accustomed to being the predator, not the prey. Taking in his reaction, Lila said, "Look, the provosts are used to dealing with drunken students and domestic squabbles, not professional killers." Ash was learning things about Lila Barrowhill that he had never known before, things he wasn't sure he wanted to know. His hard-drinking dorm mate had just dispatched multiple armed men without making a sound. Ash had his secrets, and so, apparently, did she.
"By the way, thanks for saving my life," Ash said. "Good that you came home early."
Lila snorted. "Don't thank me just yet." Ash extended the handkerchief toward her.
"He was carrying this in his bag."
Lila took it, examined it under the lamp, and handed it back. "I don't get it," she said.
"I think they follow a blood scent," Ash said, wadding the cloth in his fist. "This is my blood. Somebody here at school must have given it to them."
He stopped then, realizing that he had nothing to say about why they might do that. "Yeah," Lila said, scowling. "Somebody must have." Her expression suggested that she had a candidate in mind. She leaned against the wall where she could watch both the man on the floor and the door. "Well, what are you waiting for? Interrogate him."
"Me?"
Ash's brain wasn't working as well as it usually did.
"No, one of the other mages in the room."
She pointed her chin at the assassin on the floor. "Time is wasting. We've got to get out of here." His subject was as pallid and gaunt as the dead man on the bed. Ash gripped his amulet with one hand and pressed the other into the assassin's chest. Then he concentrated and forced the assassin into consciousness, using the direct magical pressure called persuasion. Being a Flatlander, the man would likely have little knowledge of or defense against wizard interrogation techniques. The priest opened his eyes and fixed them on Ash. His hands scrabbled on the floor like claws trying to gain purchase. Ash flinched backward, then took a deep breath to calm himself.
"Who are you?"
Ash asked in common.
his voice cold and hard. "What is your name?"
The man squirmed as if to avoid the wizard mind pressing down on him, but there was no place to hide.
"My name is Eusebia,"
he said hoarsely, in Ardenine-accented common.
"I am of the Darien Guild."
Darien Guild, Ash repeated. What's that?
"Redeemers of mages,"
Eusebia replied. He had stopped squirming and was staring at Ash, his eyes shining with desire.
"We are the Blades of Malthus, who cleanse the world of sorcery. There are lots of mages here. How did you choose me?" "We smelled your blood. We tasted it when we were given the kill."
"Somebody gave you the kill. Who told you to kill me?"
"A mage,"
Eusebia said, eyes slitted against the wizard light, as if it hurt his eyes.
"A mage. What mage?"
Ash leaned closer.
"What was his name?"
Eusebia shrugged, as if mages were mages.
"He said there were many mages here, but you were the one to be redeemed." "You heard him say that?" Ash pressed. "You spoke with him?"
The Darien shook his head.
"The mage spoke to our master, and our master spoke to us. It seems that this mage is a man of faith."
"What faith?" Annoyance flickered over Eusebia's face.
"The true faith, the Church of Malthus. Don't pretend that you—"
Eusebia's voice trailed off as his attention was diverted. He eagerly extended a hand, palm cupped. Ash followed his eyes. Blood had soaked through the bandage on his arm and was again dripping onto the floor. The Darien brother was trying to catch the drops. Ash jerked his arm away, and Lila slammed Eusebia's wrist to the floor with a booted foot. The Darien screeched like he was being tortured.
"Hey! That hurts!"
"Then stop that!" Lila said. Maybe it was the light, but her face looked to be a strange gray-green color. The Darien brother went limp, and Lila removed her foot. Ash pushed with his mind again.
"Did he tell you why I was to be killed?" "You are Adrian sul'Harlan, the get of an unholy union between a powerful mage, Han sul'Alger, and the Witch Queen in the north."
Ash heard Lila's quick intake of breath. He looked up, met her narrow-eyed gaze, and looked away. Scummer. Never ask a question without considering what the answer might be. Well, there was no jamming that cat back into the bag. After 4 years at Odin's Ford, he'd been outed. It also confirmed what he'd suspected. It was not a random kill.
"What if you're wrong? What if I'm not the mage you're looking for?"
The man smiled an awful smile.
"Ah, but you are. And even if you were not, we have our own reasons to kill mages. We free mages from the sin of sorcery by drinking their blood."
Eusebia seemed all too willing to share the good news. Ash recalled the little goblet that hung around the blade man's neck and shuddered. Lila held something between her thumb and forefinger in front of the man's face. "What is this?" It was the stone that had paralyzed Ash. Eusebia squeezed the words out as if they hurt.
"That is Darien stone. It keeps mages still so they can be cleansed. It takes up the mana in, the taint of sorcery, so it can be used for the good of all."
Ash had never heard of Darien stone. Maybe it worked in the same way as an amulet, by storing flash, the magical energy wizards constantly produced. Only in this case, a wizard wouldn't get it back.
"We've seen 5 of you," Ash said. "Are there more?" "There are many brothers in the guild, and we've all tasted your scent," Eusebia whispered. "You are a dead man, mage. We are the best, and we never give up. If you submit, I will take you quickly and painlessly. I am quite skilled with a knife."
Still flat on his back, he reached up with both arms as if to embrace Ash. Light reflected off metal. Ash jerked backward as the blade slashed past his throat. Then instinct took over. In one movement, he'd drawn his borrowed dagger and pinned the Darien brother to the floor, with the blade through his chest. Lila all but impaled him a second time.
"Blood and bones!"
Lila looked from the dead priest on the floor to Ash and back again, then shook her head in disgust.
"I didn't even search the blood-sucking crow. I'm too stupid to live."
"I didn't search him either," Ash said.
Lila pulled her blade free, using her foot to stabilize the body.
"I'm sorry, Hansen, or sul'Harlan, or whoever the hell you are. He gave me the all-over crawls."
Ash couldn't argue with that. Eusebia's eyes were open, and it still seemed like they followed him around the room. Finally, he dropped his bloody handkerchief over the Darien's face. "Enjoy," he thought. "Come on," Lila spoke briskly, breaking the spell of indecision. "Let's bind up your arm again so you don't bleed to death. We need to change clothes, pack up, and get out of here." Ash stared at her, his thoughts muddled by loss of blood.
"What are you talking about?"
Lila wiped her dagger on the assassin's robe and shoved her sword back into its scabbard. She worked quickly, but spoke slowly, as if to the dim-witted. "The peace of Odin's Ford is broken. Clearly, princeling, Arden knows you're here and wants to cleanse the world of you. Unless you're good with that, we need to go."
"I'm not a princeling," Ash thought, but didn't say it out loud.
Lila crossed to the window, threw open the shutters and scanned the empty moonlit yard, then pulled them closed again and latched them.
"I'll be right back,"
she said. "Don't open the door to anyone but me," and she was gone again. Ash was beginning to feel dizzy and weak from loss of blood. He needed to do something about that before he was too far gone. He sat down on the hearth, his healer's kit next to him. Look on the bright side, he thought. At least poison's not a worry. It would have been washed out long ago. Ash cleaned the wound one-handed, then packed a poultice of herbs over it. He was in the process of trying to wrap it again when there came a tapping at the door. It was Lila, dressed in clean, nondescript clothing, saddlebags over her shoulder. She'd scrubbed the blood off her face and hands, too. Dropping her bags by the door, she gripped Ash's elbow and led him back to the hearth. "Here, let me help you with that. We've got to hurry, and I can't have you falling off your horse." She sat next to Ash and began rapping, but not without wrinkling her nose at the smell of the herbs.
"At least maybe the stink will keep those bloodhounds off your scent," she said.
"Are you sure Arden's in on this?" Ash asked, leaning his head back against the fireplace. "Odd that it was a wizard who ordered the kill. Our family has enemies at home. It could have been one of them."
"Maybe," Lila said, clearly humoring him. "But I don't think so.
I think Renard Turant found out who you were somehow and sent word to Arden, along with your handkerchief. Somebody set up the kill with the Darien brothers. Turant threw a party to empty out the dorms, but he knew you wouldn't come, so you'd be here alone."
She gave him a hard eye.
"That's what you get for being boring."
"What tipped you off?"
"They turtled my ale. I knew something was up, so I hurried back here."
"If they were in on it, why didn't they stop you?"
"I swapped ales with Turant, so he was down for the count," Lila said. "Arden doesn't want the academy on their necks, and I'm sure they'd like to keep training soldiers at the ford. They were likely hoping that if things went wrong, the Darien brothers would take the blame for breaking the peace, and not them."
Ash knew Lila had edited something out, something she didn't want him to know.
"Why would your turtled ale send you rushing back to the dome to check on me?"
The cadet shrugged.
"I came back here for weapons," she said, "not to check on you. When I saw blood in the hallway, I thought I'd better take a look around. You're lucky I did."
"It's an interesting theory, but there's quite a few maybes and mights," Ash said. "I'm not in line for the throne in the Fells. They had no reason to target me."
Unless his secret life had somehow become public. Lila shrugged.
Maybe they don't understand the Felsian rules of succession, or maybe they just don't care.
Or maybe King Gerard is still working on his plan to destroy my mother's family and eliminate the Grey Wolf line for good. He finally found one of us that he could get at. The anger that always smoldered in him flamed up again.
That means the Queen and the Princess Heir may be next.
Assuming it hasn't happened already. That thought was like a knife to the gut.
I'm sure they've been targets all along, Lila said. There's nothing you can do about that.
Yes, there is, Ash thought. Something I should have done or tried to do before now. For 4 years, I've been lopping legs off the spider when I should have gone straight for the heart.
Ash, are you listening to me?
Ash looked up to find Lila scowling at him. Oh, sorry. What did you say?
What we do know is that they know you're here, so it's not safe here, not anymore, if it ever was, which means we've got to get out of here.
We? A traveling companion did not fit into Ash's plans. Lila, listen, Ash said. I don't want you to change your plans. Go to your posting in the fens. I'll just go on to Freetown tonight. Problem solved. Lila looked pointedly at the body on the floor, then the body on the bed.
Right,
she said with a sour grin.
How many people here know about your plans to go to Freetown? How long before those bloodsuckers are hunting you there?
I can take care of myself, Ash said stiffly. They won't catch me by surprise again.
No, Lila shook her head. Now that your secret is out, the safest place for you is back in Fellsmarch, and that's where I'm going to take you. She gave him a sideways look. It's worth it to stay out of the swiving fens.
So what's your interest in this? What makes you think we should partner up?
I'm not talking about being partners, Lila said. I'm hoping there'll be a reward in it for me. As soon as I collect, I'm gone. She rubbed her fingers and thumb together. Now change your breeches. We won't get far if you look like you've been the guest of honor at a bloodbath. Lila folded her arms and stood, tapping her foot like she planned on supervising. She had saved his life. Now it seemed there would be a price to be paid for it. Until he got his game going, as his father would say, it was better not to leave this loose end hanging.
Turn your back, at least, Ash said.
Lila heaved a great sigh, but she turned and faced the door. I can't believe you're making a fuss about this, after everything that's happened. Stripping quickly, Ash dropped his bloody clothes on the floor and yanked on clean, small clothes, a fresh set of breeches and a linen shirt.
Can I at least help pack your things while you're busy being shy?
Lila said to the ceiling.
I'm already packed, Ash said, pulling his panniers from under the bed. Let's go.
11. Going east on the West Road. Either Ash Hansen sul'Harlan didn't want to be rescued, or he had no common sense. It wasn't like Lila expected a medal, but still, a little cooperation would be damned nice. She hadn't planned on spending a month or two nannying a blue-blood mage. She had business of her own to attend to, pressing business. Leaving the bodies where they lay, Lila and Ash carried their gear down to the first floor. The guards that were usually posted in the doorways were gone, and the corridors yawned, empty and sinister. The kitchen yard, so busy during the day, was tenanted only by moonlight and by Scraps, the mistress of kitchen's battle-scarred tomcat. The lock on the kitchen door easily gave to Lila's practiced hand. Scraps watched balefully from the doorway as they gathered as much traveler's food as they could carry, salted meat, bread and cheese and dried fruit, 2 skins of wine. Given the carnage in the dormitory, a raid on the kitchen would receive little attention in the morning. While they worked, they argued, debating which road to take. Lila favored the Tamron road, which would get them into friendly territory quicker and keep them away from Arden's court. She didn't feel it necessary to mention that it would also make it less likely that they would run into someone she knew.
The last thing she needed was to be seen with Princeling sul'Harlan. Ash pushed riding east to Arden's-Court, then north through Delphi.
"The Tamron Road is the logical choice, which means they'll be watching it," he said. "Only an idiot would head straight for Arden's-Court."
"Exactly," Lila said. "Only an idiot would try that. I don't like it. That road is heavily traveled, always crawling with Southerners."
We are in the south,
Ash said, rolling his eyes. "More traffic means we'll be easier to overlook."
unless we run into more of those blood-sucking crows of Malthus.
Or some other people I'd just as soon avoid, Lila thought. "Let's split up then," Ash suggested. "I'll go via Arden's-Court, and you go via Tamron. We'll lay bets on who gets there first."
"You're trying to get rid of me," Lila thought, "so you can go south to Freetown like you planned. Well, I'm not going to let you." But that meant giving in. Once that was decided, they hurried on to the stables, where Ash insisted that they pick out horses to steal, arguing that they couldn't take their own if they wanted to play dead. Ash chose Maribel, a spirited piebald mare that had belonged to the messenger service, so she'd been exercised more than most of the students' personal mounts. Lila picked Brady, a bay military gelding newly arrived from Arden, with a student at Wien House. Less than an hour after the last man died, they rode away from Odin's Ford. At least Lila convinced Ash not to leave a note for Taliesin, Dean of Spiritus, the Healing Academy. She was determined to win that one.
"I don't want her to worry about me," Ash said, looking down at his hands.
"Maybe she's the one that outed you," Lila suggested. "She knows you better than anyone, right?"
Ash flinched when she said that, but then he shook his head. "If she wanted me dead, I would be dead," he said.
"That's an odd thing to say about a healer," Lila said. "Anyway, she won't worry if she thinks you're dead, and it's probably best for now if that's what everyone thinks, especially while we're traveling through Arden." So far, the princeling had met all of her admittedly low expectations. He was a major pain in the ass. Still, she couldn't get the image of the blood-sucking crows out of her mind. They rode first in the moonlight, and then in the darkness after the moon had set, and finally in the mist of the early morning, climbing the long, gradual slope away from the river. As the light grew, the great trees of Tamron Forest gradually became visible on either side, like rooted ranks of soldiers. Their horses moved at a brisk pace, their hooves flinging up the mud of the road, splashing through the puddles of a recent rain. They didn't have much to say to each other.
"I wonder how wide a net they'll cast," Ash said after an hour's silent riding.
"Who knows?" Lila said. "Depends on how committed they are to killing you." She studied him critically. "Your size and that copper head of yours make you stand out." Ash reached up, fingering his hair, as if he'd forgotten what color it was. "Too bad the weather's not colder," Lila said. "Once it's light out, it would be best if you kept your hood up." As the day came on, the landscape around them began to emerge. The colors muted and grayed. The autumn mist clung low to the ground, filled the ditches on either side of the road, and shifted and swam as the horses moved through it. Now and then, the dense forest was punctured by a clearing along the road, centered on a farmhouse and other buildings. The shapes of people drifted through the yards like ghosts. Farmers rose early. Tamron Forest crowded close to the road, as if anxious to reclaim it, and Lila found herself startling at every sound. The roots of great trees broke through at the berm, and the canopy often met overhead, shutting out the frail light. Any assassin hidden along the road would be but an arm's length away. Lila imagined a rush from the undergrowth, sinewy hands reaching up to drag Ash from his horse and slam him to the cold earth, a circle of pale faces within dark cowls. Once they heard hooves behind them on the packed surface, horses coming fast.
They shoved off through the small growth that fringed the road and hid behind the massive trunk of a moss-covered oak. A dozen black-clad men on dun-colored horses thundered past, ring-mail glittering. Among them, Destin Karn, the only one unarmored, eyes fixed forward, slitted against the wind and dust.
"The King of Arden's guard," Ash murmured when they had gone. "They're in a hurry, aren't they?"
Bones, Lila thought. Destin Karn of everyone might expect me to take this road. I told him I was going to, after all. Is he hunting me after I ditched him on Bridge Street? Or is he hunting Ash? Does he suspect that I helped him escape? Maybe he's just hurrying home to report the bad news. Now they proceeded more cautiously than before, aware that the soldiers they'd seen might double back when the trail grew cold. When they began to see traffic upon the road, Lila led the way back into the woods, penetrating several 100 yards before she chose a camping place, a defensible spot with a low hill at their backs. They built no fire. It wasn't worth the risk. They left their horses saddled, fed them, and tethered them to a long lead to allow them to browse. Then they threw their blanket rolls on the ground in a grove of trees. They sat up for a bit, eating cheese and bread, passing one of the wineskins back and forth until it was empty. Lila ached all over, courtesy of the rough and tumble in Stokes, and from riding horseback cross-country for the first time that season. Ash sat with his back against the trunk of a tree, one knee bent, the other leg straight. He said little, though she noticed he was favoring his arm. By the time they finished the wine, Lila could scarcely keep her eyes open.
"I'll take first watch," Ash offered.
Lila shook her head.
"I'll be fine," she mumbled,
her lips oddly numb.
You've got to be exhausted from loss of blood and having the flash sucked out of you and all. Let me just get up and walk around a bit. That'll wake me up."
"Hey,"
Ash said, putting a hand on her arm.
"Go to sleep. You don't have to be the hero every single time."
"All right." Lila yawned. "But wake me up at midday, and I'll take over."
She slid into her bedroll and was immediately asleep. When Lila awoke, shivering, the sun was low on the horizon, the light nearly gone. It took her 2 tries to sit up, and then her head spun so that she had to brace herself with her hands. She was stiff and sore from lying too long on the ground, half covered in leaves, and her mouth tasted like the floor of an unmucked stall.
"Ash?"
She looked around the clearing, and the motion nearly put her flat on her back again.
"Ash?"
she said a little louder. Brady stood a short distance away, looking at her, ears pricked forward, still chewing. The other horse was gone. A scrap of chamois was pinned to a nearby stump with Lila's own knife. It bore